everyone, I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Vince.
Vince, how you doing, man?
I'm alright, how are you,
Good
Cap?
to see you, thanks for being here. Today we are going to do a commentary on the Mask of Zorro.
As opposed to The Mask.
Yes, that's right. Actually, we've never done a commentary on the Mask.
Ooh.
That would be a good one to have you on.
Sure.
We should do that sometime.
I am qualified by enjoying the movie.
Well, so, same here. I'm qualified by enjoying it and having written about it once. It's not like I'm a giant Mask fan.
Huh.
I mean, like comic Mask. I mean, that movie obviously diverted a lot from that material, which is part of why it's good.
Yeah,
Because that material's not great.
You just watched the cartoon show.
Pretty immature. But anyway, the cartoon show was based on the movie. But anyway,
true.
so Vince and I today are doing the Mask of Zorro, and this was requested by Lone Wolf Jedi of Gotham on Patreon, so thanks to you, sir, finally getting around to this commentary. Vince and I have been trying to put this together for weeks, and we're finally sitting down to do it, so I'm excited.
Right. You know, we both work for intelligence agencies, so we...
Gets in the way of life sometimes.
He was in Bucharest, I was in Budapest. It was just kind of a hard thing to figure out.
Yeah.
Like, bees doesn't make them neighbors.
Yeah, you know, we were last time Vince and I did a commentary, you know, we were watching The Phantom, and he was like, this is just like Budapest, and I was like, you and I remember Budapest very differently. So I brought Vince on this because Vince has read some Zorro comics. Vince is kind of, would you call yourself a Zorro fan?
Yeah, I love Zorro. I get a big kick out of it. In fact, I met Andy Parks, and I'm pretty sure I remember which one's which. I've met a lot of folks that day. But Andy Parks wrote the Lone Ranger Death of Zorro comic.
Oh, cool.
And so I bought it and had him sign it, and he said the same thing that most other folks say when I have them sign things. They go, huh, thanks for buying that. And I said, I am.
We didn't know anyone was reading them.
He's like, I said, I'm a big Zorro fan. And he said, really? More than the Lone Ranger? Yeah. Why does everybody keep asking me that?
What's really funny, because I would say that in its day, Zorro was more popular than the Lone Ranger ever was.
You know,
or am I wrong about that?
The Disney
that
Lone
TV show
Ranger was
really
a big
popular.
deal.
It was, but I mean, Zorro early on was really popular too. Like, that silent film was huge.
Yeah, good point.
Like, it's really hard to compare, like, 1930 something to the 60s, to the 50s and 60s, right?
Especially when I wasn't around back then, so it's hard to gauge
We weren't alive for either of those eras.
This is true. I would have to agree, based on the fact that nobody's going to go back in time and go, oh man, remember that one Lone Ranger movie that was in film canon? No, because there's not one.
Yeah.
There's Lone Ranger things, but not something that is literally important to the genesis of film.
Well, you can certainly make the argument, I think, pretty easily that Zorro is more influential than Lone Ranger is. And I think Zorro was, of course, a major influence on Lone Ranger. And I'm not saying Lone Ranger's not influential, but you could make the argument that Zorro is technically the first superhero. And when I did the rewind on this movie, it was for a proto-superhero unit. So I did this, and I did Dick Tracy, and I did some things that, like, are influential in superheroes but don't necessarily count as superheroes. And I have argued with people that say if Batman's a superhero, Zorro has to be.
Yeah, good point. Well, I mean, that's the thing. The whole idea of the masked hero would be the predecessor to the superhero, right?
Yeah, and Zorro seems to be kind of the first one.
I'm not going to say definitely the first one, but he's definitely early. Like, Zorro was even in... Or Zorro. We're talking about Zorro. Shadow is even in some ways based on Zorro.
Yeah.
Batman was based clearly on the Shadow.
And also has Zorro influences.
Indeed.
He's got Cave, and he's got sometimes a similar backstory. I mean, there's a lot of...
And a mask, and a sword occasionally.
Yeah, and a Batmobile. I mean, a horse.
Wait, what? I'm going to have a bat horse. Horsemobile.
So... I think Batman has had a bad horse before.
It's a Tornado-mobile.
So we're gonna watch this and talk about it. This is a movie that I don't know super well. I did a rewind on this really early on. I watched it again recently because it had been so long. How many times have you seen this? How familiar are you with this particular iteration?
Probably watch this a couple times a year.
Oh, do you really?
Yeah.
I didn't realize you were that big of a fan of this movie. Cool.
Yeah, I've read all the Dynamite, Matt Wagner, Zorro comics.
So you were more qualified for this than I realized you were.
I'm a fan of Zorro. I love me some Zorro.
That's exciting, because I wasn't sure what I would have to say for 2 hours and 10 minutes. And so you'll have hopefully a lot of stuff to fill in.
Well, that'll be okay. I'll have a geek voice, and I'll say, "Did you see that? You see that? Oh, that was a good part."
All right, if you want to watch it with us, get out your DVD or Blu-ray, however you want to watch it. Get it to timestamp 0. It's not streaming for free anywhere that I know of except for Crackle, which does it with commercials, so you're not going to want to watch it with that because it'll interrupt us a lot. And then get ready to press play when I say now. Just get past all the menus. And here we go. Everybody, please press play right now. Oh, hold on.
What?
Okay, that didn't work. We have commercials in ours. Hang on.
How dare they?
Okay, we're, wait, what? This is so weirdly set up. Hang on.
Okay, we'll tell you when to hit play.
We totally will. What is going on? I tried to skip past this, Vince, and then I just went back to the menu.
Huh.
Okay, hang on. Trying to fix it. Okay, so I'm going to say get past all the, like, FBI piracy warning things and stuff, and then you'll be synced with us, because I have no idea if all of this is on the DVD, so if you're trying to sync up with a different thing, you're not going to have all of this, so don't press play yet. So to get it to actual 0, press play right. Hold on. We're almost there. Everybody please press play right now.
No. Oh, God.
That was the worst.
That's okay. When you see clouds, you know you've made it. Same thing I feel about Daybreak.
So I remember as a kid being just absolutely blown away by this movie.
Me too. Like, this would be the first moment that I was like, Zorro was pretty cool, man.
Yeah, and it was, because, I grew up with some old movies, and it was one of the first movies I saw that was new when I was a kid that I said, oh, this is old Hollywood.
Oh, yeah. I could see that.
Like somebody figured out how to authentically go back in time and make an epic like this. And it's modern in all the ways it needs to be, in, production values and stuff. Like, it's not a not modern movie, but it's such a throwback to old Hollywood.
Yeah,
and it
definitely in keeping in the spirit.
Yeah. And it doesn't feel horribly, like 90s, big budget, like blockbuster.
Yeah. I mean, every so often.
It's not a super formulaic thing, like...
There's kind of, I don't know, there's this kind of like action tongue-in-cheek thing that it does fit into. I mean, when Zorro, obviously this is coming up, so, hell, why would you listen to a commentary if you hadn't seen the movie? But, when he jumps down and he misses the horse, I'm like, there's a lot of mugging at the camera that happens.
That's a good point.
It does kind of fit into the 90s stuff.
90s, and the book ended like him standing clearly on a soundstage with a blinking light at him is the end of Batman Forever. And this comes out a year after that. I think this is 96. It's 96 or 98.
Yeah, I saw it in theaters when I was a kid, so we're gonna say that's right. That's my metric for saying what the time frame was. Remember when you were headbutted by somebody being thrown into your... Super inconsiderate kid. Think about it.
That guy looks like Hispanic Robert Downey Jr. It's interesting. One of the reasons I also wanted to have you on this was because it was interesting that I got requests both for this and The Phantom at the same time, because those movies have a lot in common.
Yeah.
And because they're both throwbacks to admittedly different kinds of movies. Like, The Phantom was trying to be a movie serial, and this is trying to be... Oh, look, it's Dr. Octopus. Or it looks like Dr. Octopus. It's not actually him, but it looks like him.
Alfred Molina has been in things of the kind.
Well, not only that, but he's had that haircut before, because he was in Luther, and he looks exactly like that in Luther.
Right on. What's interesting about The Phantom being, like, not necessarily a love note to The Phantom, but a love note to movie serials. But this one, I feel like, is literally a love note to Zorro, because Don Alejandro de la Vega is not necessarily the main character of the movie. So, him being Zorro, and that being Anthony Hopkins in the movie.
Yeah, you could make the argument that they're dual protagonists. I think it is kind of supposed to be that sort of movie, but I think that he kind of has his character arc pretty early.
Yeah. Well, then again, he gets the payoff later in the movie.
Yeah.
So, but there is kind of a pretty clear cut I mean, granted.
Oh, you're saying Anthony Hopkins' character is not the protagonist of the movie,
right?
Yeah, no, he's not.
Yeah.
I forgot what his name was for a minute, but yes, he's not.
Antonio Banderas definitely being
yes, of course,
the main guy. Oh, another example of mugging at the. I mean, realize none of this stuff's right now.
But you agree, and I know we're way early talking about this, but do you agree that Antonio Banderas' character does kind of get his character up pretty early? Like, I don't think he's necessarily learning a lot of stuff all the way throughout the movie. Like, he gets over his like alcoholism and figures out his life like pretty fast, and like he's got to learn to like have charm and stuff, but that happens pretty quick. And
I feel like he masters certain things as it goes along. Like, he gets good at one thing, but that doesn't necessarily make him good at the other. And I feel like the horse is a good example, because he doesn't really gel with his horse.
But I guess the question, if it's a coming-of-age story for him, does he, like, fully mature by the end, or is he basically matured by, like, halfway through?
I would say that he fully matures when he takes on, Capitan Love. I would say. Like, he's like... I mean, I guess maybe you can call that the payoff.
Yeah.
But
no, you might be right about that.
I think like he suddenly like is willing to take certain kinds of pain.
That's fair. And maybe has like a realization of the reality, the gravity and the reality of the situation more.
Yeah.
Like earlier, it feels like it comes easier for him, and I mean, he's got the arc of like wanting to get revenge for what happens to his brother, and then at the end he does get that revenge. And then, there's the question of, was it the revenge that mattered to him more, or the justice? So I guess you have that.
And, maybe you can even say that he fully matures after he has third generation Zorro.
Yes.
Where
that's true, yeah, where it doesn't even really happen until we get to the future.
Because he's, at some point, like throughout the majority of the movie, I think that he sees himself as himself. He doesn't see himself as Zorro. But then you fast forward to the future, and he's not describing it as, I did this for my brother, I did this for me, I did this for love, I did this because some dude happened to take pity on me or see potential.
It's two self-serving things, and two things that are kind of shallow, right? Where one is... I mean, the revenge thing is arguably not entirely shallow, but it's like, I want revenge for what happened for my brother. And some of that's a code of honor thing. So revenge is handled differently in this than modern revenge is, which is one of the reasons I really appreciate this movie, is that it's looking at the old sensibilities of this period and not necessarily the sensibilities of the period it's made in, which is fantastic. But secondly, sorry, I make long points sometimes. Secondly, what he wants
so do they.
is...
They're all swords.
What he wants is fame and glory, which is not what Zorro is supposed to be about.
Right. And what's interesting about Zorro, you bringing it back full circle, the idea here, can you say that maybe what we looked for in the 90s, or even like today, because we're really taking a full turn back to it, but where it's kind of a comedy action, Zorro was always kind of, I'm not going to call it tongue-in-cheek, but I am going to say it kind of like the love of life.
Yeah, sure.
Within the action genre. Because Zorro
makes that's what
jokes.
Swashbuckling adventure is, right? This goes back to
Precisely. So in some ways, like, this came out at the perfect time.
Yes.
I almost feel like you could do this again. I feel like another Zorro movie could be around the corner. Not to say that it's going to be. Not to say that anybody but me cares.
Yeah.
Well, and the gentleman that requested this.
Yeah, well, and if you look at things that have tried it recently, they just haven't either been marketed correctly and or they just haven't been great movies. Like, we tried to do another Robin Hood recently, but we did what we always do with Robin Hood, where we try to make it, we at least sell it on Dark and Gritty. I didn't see that movie. But we sold it on Dark and Gritty and like outlandish fun at the same time, and I think it was a confused tone of the trailer and it turned people off. So you have to make sure and not do that. I think this had an excellent advertising campaign.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what's not appealing about this?
It's not hard to sell. It's got so much great action that's really easy to put on screen, and it just looks like a lot of fun.
It's a pretty movie. I've always loved the Z. Like the cutting the Z and things. I've
always thought Zorro is not as popular if his name started with a different letter.
Although there is argument for like Voro, that could be fine. You know,
Well, I was gonna say
V for Vorendetto.
I always thought one of the reasons that you were
Sounds like
such
a
a
cookie.
fan of this movie is that I know that that you. I mean, I'm sorry for giving this away on camera, but I know that you tend to put on a mask and go out and fight crime, and then you find bad guys who have done horrible injustices to people. You put a V in their foreheads
That's right.
for Vince,
And-
for Vinzaro.
People, what does the V stand for? And I'm like, you can't ask me that. That's my real name. And they're like, why are you doing it in people's foreheads then?
This
Like,
movie has
good
so
question.
many money shots. It's hard to say what the money shot is. That's one. That could have been and probably was a poster.
Yeah.
Where he's in front of the sun there.
I definitely have a
setting
couple of
sun.
Zorro things in front of the sun, but I'm pretty sure the ones that I have on my computer are from Disney Zorro.
Oh, okay. Have you ever gone back and watched the silent film?
Yeah,
Is
it's
that
great.
is that Mark of Zorro or is
Yeah.
that the later one?
Mark of
What's-
Zorro.
What's the really popular one from the 50s?
Oh,
With the master swordsman guy who's not Basil.
Dude Face McGee, I think is his name.
Yeah, I can't remember what that movie's called. Again, Zorro's a blind spot for me. I don't know very much about this character. This was the thing I grew up with. This is the Zorro I know.
I have not watched the one from the 50s, and Tyrone Power. That would be his
Yes,
name.
that's what it is. Yeah, that's his name.
So I've not seen the one with Tyrone Power in it. Or if there's more than one, I've not seen it. Which is funny because I've even seen some of these like ridiculous Zorro's Black Whip. I've seen that. So.
Oh, weird. What is that?
Man, there's a couple of these things that were so like awful that I kind of forget which one's which. I think Zorro's Black Whip is the one with the Lady Zorro. But
Oh, interesting.
now that I mention it, I don't recall which one's which. Because there's also like Zorro's Fighting Legion, which is mostly forgettable, and it's just shots of people riding around on horses. So
I mean, there are a lot of Zorro movies, and one of the reasons I've always wanted to say that Zorro doesn't really count as a superhero is because I don't want to have to review all of his movies.
well, a lot of these things aren't necessarily movies. They're
Because
like
there's so many.
if you're going to extend this to movie serials, then sure.
Okay, sure.
But like, there's Don Q, I think it was also pretty good. Like a direct sequel to Mark of Zorro.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's worth watching. It's Don Q, son of Zorro, stars the same guy, Douglas Fairbanks. So Don Q essentially he's in Spain, he ends up getting into some trouble, and you see him finding his way out. Like there's some like international politics that get involved. Nothing like super hard to follow, but like there's an ambassador from another country that there are some hijinks that ensue.
Oh, and I misspoke earlier when I said 30s. Of course, the original Zorro movie came out in 1920, and I didn't realize it was quite that old.
Yeah, this is the 100-year anniversary of
It was
Zorro.
20s, but I forgot it was that old. Yeah, and it happened.
1919.
I was going to say very shortly after the first story was published, and I know that I can't remember his name, but I know that the guy that wrote the Zorro stories didn't plan to write more than the first one, and then it got really popular after that movie, and so that inspired him to write more.
Johnston McCulley.
There you go.
I always forget it because I think his name is Macaulay Johnston, but knowing that I was going to forget it, I looked it up right before we started.
I thought his name was Macaulay Culkin, which explains that Zorro story that takes place in a kid's house, and Zorro shows up and helps him make like a bunch of traps for burglars, and he like hits them on the head with paint cans and stuff. I always thought it was weird that Zorro hit people on the head with paint cans.
He says, "Take that, Capitan Love,"
But the other big thing that this happened,
or Ramon, or whichever.
the other big thing this has in common with the Phantom is that it's a legacy hero, and that not only is this the story of a new version of the character, although the Phantom is not an origin story. This is an origin story, but this is a passing of the torch movie where the Phantom is not one of those, but it is about a legacy hero. But also, neither of those characters in this or in the Phantom are the first one, and we don't know for sure that in this movie until the very end, when it's mentioned that there were many men who were called Zorro. Through this entire movie, you could assume that Antonio
Anthony Hopkins.
Anthony Hopkins is the
You
first
know,
Zorro, but he's not. Because at the end, Antonio Banderas says many people have worn the mask, and I think he says that when he's telling the story to his baby.
Then again, is he talking about literally Zorro, or is he talking about people who have donned a mask in order to seek justice?
We'll look at it when we get there at the end.
Or is he talking about people who will wear the mask?
No, he says past tense.
Because now that you say that, I don't recall.
I'm pretty sure the idea is supposed to be that he did not create Zorro, and that Zorro even predates this version of Zorro.
Which, I mean...
we'll see exactly how it's worded.
If there is a history of masked men in Spain, then sure.
Yeah.
Right on. And am I just assuming... Wow, is that a false memory? Is he not Don Alejandro?
I think you're right. I just couldn't remember his name when... This is one of those movies where, for whatever reason, it's difficult for me to remember everybody's
Diego.
names.
Don Alejandro is Diego's father. So there's somebody that's listening to this going, he's not right about that, dude. Don Diego de la Vega and
Again,
Don Alejandro de la Vega being the father.
Probably not a movie I would have picked to do a commentary on, just because I don't know it super well. I mean, I do other commentaries on things I don't know as well as other things, but this is a fairly long movie that I just have not watched a lot and don't immediately have a ton to say. Like, I think I had some okay, interesting things to say in the rewind, but a lot of that rewind was, this is a solid movie, you should watch it. Like, and here's why he's like Batman.
It's funny is I've met a few people named something adjacent to Alejandro lately, so it's like fresh in my mind.
It's impressive just how much action is in this movie, but it doesn't feel like a dumb action movie.
Yeah, I feel like it's not just two people whacking swords together.
There's always stakes, there's always consequences, the violence always feels real, and when you have... I thought of this watching this the last time. When everything is built around a code of violence, where you have to fight a certain way, you can get away with choreography. In a way you can't when it's just a street fight. Because, yes, they're trying to kill each other, but they're doing it always under certain rules. It's never just swing a sword at a person. It's never just what Antonio Banderas thinks it is in the first place when he says, pointy end goes in the...
Yeah. It's one of my favorite lines. I was getting a kick out of that. In fact, I was thinking about that earlier when we were talking about tongue-in-cheek.
And
you know how to use the thing? Yeah, of course. Pointy end goes into the other man.
There's a code. Yeah, the other man. There's a code to everything. There's a code to the fighting, to the violence, and there's a code to the revenge. And it is really interesting comparing this to more modern superhero things because there is not that question of justice and revenge in this. They are the same thing, but it has to be a particular brand of revenge. And so when I said earlier that at the end of the movie, the question for the protagonist, and you're right, his character arc, I guess, is not completely finished until you get to the end of the movie. I had to noodle this out. But for the most part, but there is stuff he learns really early that I would have expected to take longer. But when you get to the end, and he does get that revenge, when I say what's more important to him, revenge or justice, what I really mean is, what is more important to him, his own personal revenge or helping the common man?
Right.
So he stays being Zorro when he could have just quit because the reason he became Zorro was to do that one thing. But he continues because it's now larger than himself.
Right. Which I think that's what this movie does well versus
this makes
something
him one
like...
of the most tragic characters in movies.
Yeah.
When he takes his daughter and raises her as his own, and the thing that... Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. The thing that twists the knife the most is that he's a good father.
Yeah. Like,
that kills you, man.
I legit believe that Raphael cares about the daughter of Zorro.
And that when he puts the gun up to her neck at the end, he would not have pulled that trigger.
Fair. But then again, hubris. Like, the idea...
It's such a great opening, man. And you get some great Zorro action right up front, so like you get what you came and paid for, but you also didn't expect to get like some real drama and pathos. It's not like a lot of direct-to-video animated DC movies where we open with like a 15-minute action scene to pad it out, so you're like, oh, that's right, I'm watching a superhero thing.
That's a great point.
Okay, so unless I'm reading this scene incorrectly, the scene actually makes no sense and does not need to be in the movie.
Yeah, unless somebody's watching them
Okay, am I right about this? No one's watching them right now, so they're pretending for no one's benefit but ours that he has actually taken these guys in and that they're, tied up and can't get away, and that he's kind of torturing them with not having water and stuff. And then we're going to find out that this is all a ruse so that they can try to steal something.
Well, then again, I mean, if you think about it, yes, if you think about it, you would likely come to the conclusion you've come to. But then again, how long could they possibly have not had water? And, like, how far back do they pull over to stop? And he might just be mocking them, and they're kind of sensitive about it. So they're not really being jerked around for that long. They could have put the ropes on just right there.
Maybe, but he couldn't force them to sing the stupid song if he didn't have them over a barrel. And if they're working with him, they wouldn't be doing that. They'd be like, screw you, I'm not singing the dumb song. Like, they're only doing that if it's actually the situation they're pretending like it is.
Yeah.
That's where that breaks down.
That's true. Although, I enjoy that Nobody's Tough as Jack song.
No, it's really funny. And then you realize you've been kind of jerked around, and suddenly I don't like it anymore.
Terrific point.
That is one of my biggest issues of the movie. And there are a few, kind of easy things like that for the camera through the movie, and a couple of kind of easy plotting things that hopefully I'll remember as we watch and point out. But
terrific point.
It's a great movie, and none of that kills it. I can't remember if I gave this a 4 in the rewind. I gave it a 3.5 or a 4. I'm pretty sure we got a 4 though.
I would be biased as heck rating it. Like, there's no way.
That's hard, yeah. Well, why do you think I gave 89 a 3.5 when I first reviewed it, and then when I went back later, I was like, that's a 2.5 or 3 at best, man. But
it's because you were stupid.
But right, sure. I thought you were talking to me.
I was quoting the movie.
I thought you were saying I gave it a 3.5 because I'm stupid.
Well, it was just well timed.
Vince, there's a reason I only have you on the channel every couple months or so, man. Like, I just...
That's
You're
fair.
just insulting me all the time now.
How dare you?
We spent so much
I know
time
that's why I
together
came, because I just insult you all the
that
time.
Vince just cannot help but say whatever is on his mind now, and he's just like, yeah, Cap's an idiot.
Three Finger Jack is a pretty cool bandit name if you think about it. I don't know why I keep saying it.
It's better than the Wet Bandits or the Sticky Bandits. Again,
I would be leery to hit him with a paint can.
The way Jack dies at the end is crazy.
Yeah.
And
that seems really unpleasant.
Heart-wrenching. Oh, God, yeah, that would be awful. I forgot about that. But yeah, it's a heart-wrenching scene, but the way he does it is also kind of funny. Like, everything he does is humorous, so like he goes out on that. Also, he's a character we could have used way too much, but I honestly wish somehow we could have seen him like a couple more times. I wish he could have been utilized a little more, but I don't really know what you would have done with him if he's in that mine that whole time.
Yeah. Ugh. I think it's a real great scene. There's a great payoff to this whole Jack relationship, where
well, you forget about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I say that it'd be nice to see him more, but I actually think it's more effective because you forget about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we get so hung up on the Marietta brothers, and maybe I'm not saying their name right, but
yeah, at this point, we got to assume that none of us know what any of these characters are named. I think the main character, I think the love interest is Julie.
I think his name was Dim Diego the Map. What was his name?
I think Zorro's horse is the name of another big 90s movie. What is it? Twister?
Twister?
This is just a badass thing to do. Like, that's the equivalent of falling on your own sword.
Yeah, I love how he spit too, like the expression on his face. Although I don't think he hit much with it, if I'm being honest.
That's true. That would be really embarrassing, right? If like, oh, I thought you meant when he shot himself. Like, it's kind of hard to kill yourself that way.
Oof.
You know, like you could miss pretty easily. And, like, you'd be horribly injured, but you wouldn't necessarily die right away. That'd be embarrassing, right? If you're, like, writhing there and, like, okay, fine. It can still be an honor for you. Just get it over with.
It doesn't really look like he hit much when.
That's what I was saying. That's what I thought you were saying.
I'm with you.
But
I was referring to him spitting.
Spitting. Yeah. There's a lot of dismembered heads in this movie, and it feels like a family picture. But then there's dismembered heads and a dismembered hand. And isn't it really interesting the kind of
I think they need a duffel bag cart all these heads in. At least 8 of them.
Isn't it kind of interesting that tight walk that they're walking, where this must have really skirted the R rating in the mid-90s. Yeah. This has got to be kind of a hard movie to get out for PG-13.
You know, although, like,
it wouldn't be as much now, but I think back then
there were nudity in PG movies in the 80s.
Yeah, but nudity was, well, yes, but we didn't have PG-13 at that point, and yeah. But nudity and violence have always been handled differently.
True.
What I'm saying is, some of the violence in this movie very often would get you an R rating, and I'm just kind of surprised that they managed to keep this PG-13 and still had as much violence as they do. Like, I bet there's, I don't know this for a fact. I bet there's some stuff that's cut from this movie that took that a little farther.
Yeah, fair point. I mean, there are some things that are implied. Like, we don't actually see his head cut. We just
but you do see heads in the movie, and that's surprising.
Yeah, you literally see heads.
Yes.
I mean, of course you see several heads, but we're talking about dismembered.
We're seeing heads right now, in fact. Because it's a movie about people, and you're usually focusing on their heads.
I am terrified.
See, look at all these heads.
By membered heads.
I want to make sure to deliver some really poignant insights, like, look at all these heads. So, I think all of this confusion could have been averted by just being organized about your prisoners. Like, just have a roster or make people wear name tags. Like, they're going down here in this dungeon trying to find the guy who is Zorro, and they can't find him because they don't know the names of anybody, and all they have to do is talk to the guy from the beginning and they'll know what his name is.
Yeah.
And then they could find him if they were organized.
Fair point, but if they're just continually putting boatloads of people in prison,
and they are,
and they're just leaving them there to rot forever.
Well, yeah, the idea is supposed to be that you are essentially dead. They're idiots for not knowing.
Which one of you was Don Alejandro?
They're idiots for not knowing that this is going to happen.
Yeah.
And also, so they do know who Zorro is, right?
Yeah.
Why are they not asking for his name? Why are they saying Zorro? Like, they know the name of the guy.
Terrific.
Don't they know the name of the guy?
Yeah. Terrific point. Like, they invade his house. They obviously knew where he lived. They saw his face.
So that's weird.
And, you know, they might be Zorro, but I am Spartacus.
But yeah, they're idiots for not thinking that everyone in there is going to say, I'm Zorro. This is the most interesting thing that's happened to us in 20 years. Like, of course we're all saying we're Zorro. Anything to get us out of here. Wherever you would take us. Maybe you'll kill us. That'd be better than being here. Like, they're dumb.
Yeah. That's also a good point. Like, end it now. I mean,
I
not
have
the
more
movie.
issues with the scene than I realized I did.
Wish somebody'd throw me into a wall. That's not true.
So I'm sorry, I'm not sure why I'm like unconfident about this right now, but this guy is the guy with the daughter, right?
Yes.
Okay,
it's Raphael.
Okay,
that's correct.
Yeah, so when I said the guy at the beginning, I meant him. So that is Raphael. For some reason, that line I was not totally sure, but even when I watched this before, I was like, that is still Raphael, right? Okay, so again, he knows the guy's name. Like, it's not even somebody else sending someone there. It's Raphael.
Yeah, so he knows his name. He knows what he looks like.
Yeah.
Now, granted...
No, I'm totally cool with him not recognizing him.
You add some decades. That's fair.
I'm totally cool with him and the long beard. That's fine. The issue is, why does he say Zorro? Why doesn't he say the man's name? Sorry, I'm harping on this. But anyway, all the set building in this is wonderful. Zorro has one of the best bat caves that wasn't a bat cave.
He has a fox cave.
Phantom has an okay bat cave. This has a way better bat cave.
Always enjoyed the expression. Now, granted, I wonder just how powerful gunpowder is. I don't know. I've never played with gunpowder. Anybody tell me, would you blow off your ankle
Also,
doing that?
this is Pulp Fiction, so you're going to give it some of that movie logic.
That's fair. I mean, granted, how many movies do you see people get knocked out and then be perfectly okay as if they didn't have a concussion?
And that's the thing is this again is not a throwback to movie serials. It's based on pulp prose,
Right.
from the teens and the 20s. And so as far as like cinema goes, it's not dealing with any particular form except for swashbuckling adventure epics, which were really popular in the 30s and 40s.
Yeah. Because, I mean, we literally talking about Zorro. or Robin
yes,
Hood or any of that stuff.
But especially Robin Hood and anything that that actor, a lot of stuff that actor did. Why can't I think of his name right now?
From Mask of Zorro?
No, from the 30s Robin Hood.
You know, I couldn't remember his name either.
It'll come to me in a minute. Errol Flynn.
There you go.
Kind of surprising Errol Flynn never played Zorro.
You know, fair point. Then again,
and
maybe he was just costly. Maybe he didn't do his own stunts.
I think he did a lot of it. I mean, he was known as a good swordsman, and he did a lot of those kinds of epics. I think they just didn't make one right then, or at least on this scale. But I don't know. I don't know enough about this stuff. Maybe there is one right then. I'd have to go back and look.
Your gold's all lumpy. Smooth it out into a coin.
You have lumpy gold.
I love the half-hearted clap. They're like, I mean, obviously that's the point. The idea, yeah, sure, yeah. Or
Obviously, there's some good social commentary here about government corruption, and we're kind of, I think with Zorro, we're kind of like walking a line between historical fiction and alternate history fiction.
yeah. I mean, granted, he up here he says that they were paid to be there.
Yeah.
And
But like he's really
Zorro-
great at working a crowd. He's gonna play both sides, which is great. So like later on, he kind of he's playing like the little people, but he's also initially kind of playing his own equals as well until they kind of figure out what he's doing.
Although I think this is a little interesting, considering that it's Don Diego de la Vega and Don Alejandro de la Vega, the Dons being the only line of defense, if you think about it, the only person who was capable of combating the corrupt government was Zorro, who was a Don.
Yes.
So now, granted, not every Don cared, but the whole idea, if you watch Mask of Zorro, is trying to bring the Dons together in order to save the people from the government. And so it's kind of like saying you unite the rich in the defense of the poor against the establishment. But you get to this movie,
Well, yeah, because at that point it's business versus the state.
right? And what I like about this movie is that it recognizes the combination of the state and big business, where their interests align with one another and their tax dollars flow freely in and out of the pockets of the rich.
Yeah.
So it's where you completely remove the peasants from the equation. It's just they're cogs in the machine. So this movie is relevant today just as it was back then,
Yes.
and it kind of takes what was a largely I'm not going to say archaic, but kind of time-locked notion and modernizes it.
Yeah, this is always relevant when you have a corrupt state, corrupt business, and arguably it's difficult for that not to happen because power corrupts people. And so the optimism of something like Zorro or like Batman, and again, this is one of the big things that they have in common, is the idea that money doesn't necessarily have to corrupt you, and that you can use that power for the common man if you see them as your equals, even though you have more than they do.
At some point, I start to wonder. Like, I mean, granted, that would be like intellectual conversation that's not necessarily quite related to Zorro. Like,
Yeah, sure.
Does money actually have to corrupt you?
Yeah,
but
exactly.
then again, I suppose you can ask that question because obviously he does not come from money.
Yes.
And also, like, the idea of being a criminal.
Well, he doesn't come from money, but he's going to come into money. Like
Right.
when you see him in the future, he looks as well off, and I don't know if he's a Don, but he looks as well off as the first Zorro did.
I would assume that he becomes a Don, but I don't recall.
I mean, he marries into money.
And I guess at the time, you would just
Obviously.
assume they are Dons. I mean, now we call them billionaires, but...
But, like, so the question is always, in real life, does this happen? Like, how many people that are super wealthy are actually as above board as they act like they are? And are there actually skeletons in every wealthy person's closet? And that kind of thing. But the optimism of something like this, and even something like Superman, is supposed to be, maybe you can't name me right now, but it doesn't mean that it's not possible. So, like, Superman has all these amazing powers. He could take over the world, but he doesn't. And he doesn't see himself as above people. And... one of the things that, I talk about this all the time, but one of the things that makes it difficult for a lot of people to relate to and believe in an idea like Superman is they don't see it in their real world. And one of the reasons I've always thought that characters like this are important is because it suggests that notion, and we could maybe put that into practice and make it possible even if we don't think we've seen it much in real life.
Right. I mean, yeah, it being possible. Fair point. One of the things,
And that's why none of these things are like overly realistic things.
Yeah. I mean, how many folks actually throw the tip of the whip out and then swing? Like other than Zorro and Indiana Jones.
So the question is always how much of the fantasy is that aspect of it. But even if you don't think that tends to happen, you can get away with that in a more fantastic setting, a more heightened setting, and then it becomes an optimistic piece that's not about a character who is realistic and relatable, but about a character who is suggesting a better way of life, a better way of being.
In this movie is really kind of a meeting of the classes.
Yes,
because
of course.
You're essentially saying it doesn't matter where you came from, you're all human beings.
Yeah.
And so here's one guy who came from money, here's one guy who didn't come from money, and at some point they you prove that some guy who used to be a thief can actually benefit the entirety of the population.
And status is completely arbitrary. It's decided by the people that are already in power.
Right.
So now he has no status because it has been decided because he was Zorro that he has no status. But he used to be a Don.
Right.
Like, that's...
I followed your point. I didn't quite catch everything you said. You're like, it's okay. We're watching a movie, I guess. Whatever. I got Anthony Hopkins in my ear. What's interesting is even just looking at their weaponry. Well, obviously he has both weapons at the moment, but one was wielding a sword, and the other one was wielding what looked like a stick that was makeshift into a cane. So,
and later Anthony Hopkins will wield a spoon.
Precisely. Not much later. I think that scene's coming pretty quick.
It's after the big montage. It is a little bit later. No, actually, that is coming quite a bit later because he has to. I think he has to go be Zorro the first time before that happens.
Oh, you know what? I think you're right.
Because after that, he's going to go to the party, and he's got to be Zorro before he goes to the party.
How many times?
Because the spoon sets up the party. Because he's like, choose your weapon, and then he picks up the spoon, and then he's like, you need to go to this party.
You know what's ridiculous? Every time I see those ropes, every time I see him swing on those ropes, my first thought is, I've swung on ropes before. You get all the fibers like literally stuck in your hand like splinters. Like, did somebody come up and down that thing with sandpaper? What are those ropes made out of?
This movie, I think, made a bunch of stuff fresh again. We don't think of it as a superhero origin story, but it absolutely is. And I think very often those feel less like straight up boring, just get the ball rolling origins when there's a mentor character that has been through this before, and who's like passing down something as opposed to, because it feels a lot less contrived that way, right? It's like somebody else had this idea and did all these cool things, and then they're passing it down now, and sometimes if you do that wrong, it can make your main character look like he's got no resourcefulness and no ingenuity, and he doesn't come up with anything himself. And this movie doesn't have that problem, because I would argue that he's kind of a different Zorro, or he starts off at least as a different kind of Zorro than the first one.
Yeah. He's definitely a different kind of Zorro when he starts out.
Pointing and goes into the other man. It's that simple. Now, what's interesting is they don't really talk about the standards of sword fighting and the honorable way to do swordplay. So, like, he's gonna just do that because he was taught that way. But the question is, like, how much of the way the swordplay happens is because, like, both people are just so good at it that they can't just swing and hit a guy, and how much of it is because you're expected to do it a certain way, and if you don't, it's dirty pool.
Yeah, in my head,
because this guy's fine with dirty pool right now.
Right. I mean, but that's the thing. He tried dirty pool against him, and the other guy wasn't even wielding a sword, but he got his butt handed to him.
But part of that's because he was inebriated. All he has to do is just knock off the sauce and get a gun.
Well, that's true. He is, I mean, in theory,
because
several men with guns tried to take on Zorro back in the day.
Yeah, but all he wants to do is... Right, but what I'm saying is he could become a hitman as opposed to Zorro and just go kill the man he wants to kill. But then the question is, does he, want to look in his eyes? Does he want to do it the honorable way?
Yeah. When it comes to swordplay, my primary thought is you become good at it, not because you're necessarily trying to attack the other man, but rather because you're trying to protect yourself. So you can wear a whole lot of armor, but that also decreases your effectiveness with...
we can't move as fast.
Exactly. You can't... See? And there's splinters in his hands, I'm telling you.
Yeah. He's not wearing gloves or nothing. Is he? No? But I also think... This is a really good montage, by the way.
Wonderful montage.
And we haven't talked about the score, but it's just beautiful.
And I often think, when he says perfect, do it again, I often think of John Landis, like Blues Brothers, where he's like shouting, perfect, wonderful, great, awesome, great, wonderful. All right, do it again. I love the circles thing, by the way.
Yes, that's great.
The idea that there's nothing outside the circles until you have advanced to the next circle.
But also that the world gets smaller as you progress.
Yeah.
He says the circle contracts. It doesn't get bigger as you move along. It gets smaller because you're more focused.
That's a wonderful...
And then once you get to the center, it's you and your goal. It's you and your intended victim. Yeah. But yeah, I do think honor ends up being an important thing, even though it's not super discussed. And I'm not complaining that it's not discussed a lot, because I think it's just kind of taken for granted in this world. It's just expected, and that's indicative of a different way of thinking at a different time. And I really like that, and I like that we don't feel like we have to hold the audience's hand. Like, we just hope that you'll catch up and see these were the sensibilities. Because when you get to the end, it isn't just that he's fighting with his sword in like the way that is expected of him. There's a scene where I can't remember if it's him that does it or Raphael that does it, or if it's even a different character. We'll see when we get there. But he sword fights with or he's fighting with another guy, and one guy doesn't have a sword, and the other one hands him a sword. Like, if you're gonna kill someone, you're gonna do it honorably.
And I think they essentially use that as a way to differentiate between who is the good guy and who is not the good guy. I mean, granted, a lot of movies do this, but but
I think in this, even the bad guy would do it. It's like it doesn't count if you just shoot a guy in the back,
which is essentially what Raphael's henchman tries to do.
Because the bad guys in this, Raphael doesn't think of himself as the bad guy, even though he clearly does horrible things. Because there's a lot of talk in this about like, is your killing any more or less horrible than my killing? It's like, because of the class warfare you were talking about?
Yeah.
So, the people on the top think of themselves as more sophisticated and better people than the people on the bottom, even though they do a lot of the same horrible things that they do, just because of the class that they're in. And so, like, they're entitled. They can do that because they do it in a more civilized way.
Yeah. Or, I mean, you're essentially convincing yourself that it's okay to abuse other human beings.
Yeah. And partly because you're just giving orders. You're not actually physically doing it.
So the first scene, well, I guess not technically the first scene, but before the inciting incident, the foot soldier, or whatever you want to call it,
the prologue, as it were,
the gentleman that was directly underneath Raphael, he tries to shoot Vega and ends up hitting Elena. So,
yep.
And then you look at Raphael's response, which you can argue as to whether or not is there a sense of honor. Shooting somebody is who I am currently trying to best with a sword, that's dishonorable. Or you could say, well, it's because that Elena was getting into the situation. So you shoot, you hit Elena, you deserve to die, as opposed to you did something dishonorable. So I mean, I see what you're saying. I think you can make a case for it. Because obviously Raphael didn't pull out a gun when the other guy pulled out a sword.
Sometimes when I say honor, maybe I mean tradition. But I mean, like, I think some of it is also tradition. But there's a lot of things that are just done because it's like there's an unspoken rule where that's how you have to do it.
Like running upstairs while you're wearing a mask. He doesn't huff and puff. He's in good shape.
Yeah. He doesn't dance around on it like Joaquin Phoenix is the Joker.
You are correct. First time is Zorro. Before the spoon.
It's well before the spoon. There is no spoon. No, there is. There's totally a spoon.
He's really pretty limber for a guy who's just getting into... I mean, granted, he was a thief, so I guess that makes sense. But
yeah,
he also is a con man. That doesn't necessarily make him a cat burglar. The limberness
works. There is a question of just how long he trains, because I will say, even in this kind of, pulpy universe, I think he gets maybe too good too quickly. And that's often a problem in a thing like this, and a really hard thing to circumvent, where it's kind of a timeline question.
I mean, I suppose
he needs
Raphael...
to be at that for years, and it's just not that long.
I guess Raphael and daughter Zorro are pretty cozy in their new positions. But then again, how hard is it to get acclimated to a new area when you're rich?
Yeah, that's true, but like, how much time has passed between the speech he makes at the beginning and the thing with the golden Santa Ana? Like,
I think she's... Good point. He does get pretty darn good pretty darn quick.
That's what I'm saying. And I mean, like, he has no idea what to do with horses, and then at the end, he's going to stand on 2 of them. That's crazy. He's never held a sword in his life, and he's going to become, like, a master swordsman and, like, the best swordsman that ever lived in, like, what feels like a couple of days.
Yeah.
All of that's a little too easy.
And, she is still, like, getting used to being there in one of the scenes where he's already pretty good at a bunch of stuff.
Yeah. It feels like she just got there.
She's like, this seems familiar to me. And,
oh, yeah, that's right. When she's walking amongst the townspeople, and she meets the maid.
Right.
Yeah.
You should definitely get bunk beds like that for your kids. I'll bring my horse in. We'll kick it down.
They just tested the structural integrity of those beds, and they are...
Stack 7 or 8 of them on top of each other.
Star and a half on Amazon.
I tend to toss and turn when I sleep. I'd smash them to the floor, break my neck.
I also think it's interesting that the original Zorro, or the first Zorro in this, because I still think there's supposed to be Zorros before that, but he is not training him to be Zorro. he's training him to be good enough to get what he wants.
Yeah.
And he's going to be a little miffed when he puts the mask on. And I like that it's not vanity. Nothing with him is vanity, right? Like, it's not like, I don't want you to be Zorro, or I don't want you to date my daughter because I am supposed to be like that because I was Zorro, or I was her father. Like, it's a maturity issue. He wants to get him there first.
You know...
And he's kind of fine with him dating his daughter immediately, because he's already starting to, like him, and...
well, then again, you could also argue... is it a feasibility issue? Like, yeah, that's not going to last long, or it's not going to fully take fruition if I'm just training him to get what I want. And you can also argue that Vega is trying to... If he's just trying to get close enough to get what he wants, in other words, kill Raphael, get his daughter back, see if he can rekindle some kind of life,
right?
Then you also have to potentially consider that he has to relearn how to be Zorro. So not only sure, he knows all the skills, he can train a new Zorro, but has he forgotten what the important thing is? Which, the thing that made him so good, the thing that made him capable of getting what he wanted in the first place, was that it wasn't just his needs that he had in mind, it was the need of the greater good.
Yeah, you're right. And both of these guys are singularly minded.
So they
that's a
both
good point,
learn to be Zorro
that's what
while he's learning to be Zorro.
That's what the argument is going to be about later, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where Anthony Hopkins... He and Anthony Hopkins both want different things, and neither of them is really Zorro setting the example and Zorro, helping the common man. He's not liking the way Antonio Banderas is being Zorro because he's too cocky and he doesn't have the spirit of that character. But you're right, he doesn't either anymore. That's a terrific point.
I mean, they both want something similar. I mean, they are different because one wants to kill one man, one wants to kill the other man.
Exactly, yeah.
Oh, God. Just the idea of getting hit in the head with a couple of, like...
Oh, and I meant to say, this guy is Hispanic Jaws.
I always thought of him as Luthor from The Rocketeer.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that too. This is really cartoony.
The Rocket.
This is a cartoon at this point?
Yep. They
turn around and he's already set that up? He's got a cannon? There's no way! That's hilarious.
That through, buddy.
I think...
Still funny.
I think the Spanish accent is one of the most charming and romantic accents we have on the planet.
Oh, wow. Why can't I remember his name? I mean, that's one of my favorite things about the original Zorro. It's that nobody phoned it in. Like, every so often, Anthony Hopkins, you're like, yeah, it's British, dude.
Yep.
Like, I know every so often you're trying, and it becomes apparent that you're trying, but...
Well, and what's weird is, he's not doing a Spanish accent like Antonio Banderas is. He's basically just doing an American accent. Like, he's just focused on not sounding British.
It's weird.
But for some reason, I never think about it.
It doesn't bother me.
I mean, I am just sitting here talking, but like when I was a kid and I would watch this movie, it never occurred to me, well, they're from basically the same part of the world, right? Like, why does he...
Yep.
Why does he kind of sound more American than he sounds Spanish? Like...
There's a comedian, Richard Jenny, who posed the question, why is it that all the Romans in the movies have British accents? Which, I always wonder that myself.
Well, it's the same thing as sophisticated aliens, too. When you look at the 70s,
right?
Like, I mean, that's what we did with Krypton at all. Like everything. If you have smart, advanced aliens from another planet, they're going to be British. And I think it kind of comes from the same place as why we do it with Rome. We're like, that's the sophisticated culture of the time.
Which it's one of the things that kind of bugged me about the Thor movies, which was
yes.
Swedish accent. I'm like, come on, guys.
Except for Anthony Hopkins.
Swedish accent?
No, I just mean, like, I misheard what you said. I thought you said, like, just nobody has a British accent. And...
Well, one of them, the Australian guy uses a British accent.
Actually, no, I guess they do all have British accents.
Yeah, they all do.
Okay, all right.
That bugs me
Including Anthony Hopkins.
Including. I really want everybody...
Sorry, I misheard what you said.
There's every so often, and I think the most egregious where you have to question it, why is this guy with a French accent supposed to be from the Scottish Highlands? And why is this guy with a Scottish accent, why is he supposed to be from Egypt? Why? I just don't get it. Well, because they got these actors that they wanted.
This scene is really well written, and I think every scene with them is as romantic and charming as they want it to be. I think it always works. I think they have wonderful chemistry. There's never a part where I wonder, why do these people want to get together? And, like, they're Aladdin and Jasmine, right? Like, it just works.
Ah, good point.
You know, they come from different worlds, but it just works.
I also think that, especially in American culture, we have this glorification of the blue collar, where it's interesting, where we have kind of dual standards.
Yes.
Where we will celebrate somebody for having money, and then
we like the underdog. I mean, that's the main reason.
So we look at the blue collar guy, and for some reason, every Hallmark movie, some lady falls for, breaks up with her big city boyfriend and then hooks up with a guy wearing plaid from a small town who loves his mother. So...
Well, I think what we're celebrating is humility, right? Because what we do is, you're right, it feels like glorification of blue collar, but what do 98% of those stories have happen at the end? The blue collar guy gets everything he ever wanted, and he's happily ever after. And he gets to be as rich as the people that he's against in the first place. We almost always do it that way.
Terrific point.
And so it feels like we're glorifying it as we go along, but that guy is rewarded by getting the opposite of what it feels like we're glorifying. So keep that in mind.
Yeah. Hence the dual standard, right?
Yes.
The idea that...
So you're saying that the dual standard is exemplified, just both of those things, in the films themselves.
Yes. Because we can't let the thing that makes him wonderful, or for whatever reason worth glorifying, we can't allow him to suffer in turmoil for the rest of his life in squalor. We reward this guy for overcoming. Now, granted, there's also this, like, oh man, I'm not sure exactly what to call it. I'm gonna call it like suffering porn.
Yeah.
where we were like, oh look, he managed to break his circumstance.
It's right.
Like, where this idea that somehow, because he was able to break from the squalor that he lived in before, or she or whoever, they ultimately it's because they pulled themselves up by their bootstraps. Now the irony is that used to be a phrase that literally meant impossible, because you can't pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And now we have this idea that somehow you're gonna make it. I feel like that is one good way to get arthritis.
Yeah, or never walk again.
You ever do that? Jump from a crazy high point and go, that was a mistake.
You know, I did it once, and that's why I have robot legs now. But
I jumped off the top of the bleachers when I was in high school.
That's one of those movie logic things where you're like, he probably isn't getting up and walking after that. The way he landed.
If you did that in somebody's shirt, it'd be too high and it would flap down. You can't overlap him.
Oh.
I mean,
if you ruin the whole movie.
He's not good enough to be Zorro yet.
Wait a minute, he's not Zorro, he's Simon Belmont. Never thought of that until just now. He's just going around whipping candles.
Genius.
Did you ever play any Castlevania?
I used to love that game.
He's just going around whipping candles.
I was terrible at it, but I used to love it.
So, they don't show it, but the reason he's whipping candles is that's how he gets chickens for dinner. He also gets hearts out of them, but it doesn't replenish his health. It's weird.
I do chase chickens until they all come back at me and try to kill me.
This, by the way, will be the scene that will end with the spoon.
Oh, his name is Alejandro. Why do we keep... No wonder I kept saying that.
Oh, he is Alejandro. See, and that's why at the beginning I thought that's who you're talking about, and then you got me all confused about who was who.
You know, there was a part of me that wanted to
See,
risk you guys hearing the Motorola sound just so I could look it up. Like, why do I keep saying this? Turn my phone back on and get on IMDb and get the names straight.
Why is it that every time Vince points out a tidbit, we hear...
Like, why does Vince sound like he's literally talking about the Disney Zorro show? Well, because, to be honest with you, that's the thing I watched more recently.
So, the other thing that's really interesting about the scene, because we've already talked about it some, is when he says that he is upset with him for putting on the mask and being Zorro, it's not actually really for the reasons that he's acting like it is, right? Like,
right.
He's using that to mask how he really feels. What it really is he's kind of using this guy to get what he wants, and then he's going to get to a point where he cares enough about the both of them, and he starts to find himself again, I think.
Yeah. Which, I mean, I think that's a terrific point.
That's great.
I think it's a terrific point.
I showed this scene because Freddie came down while I was watching this, and he didn't watch this whole movie with me, but he started watching during the horse jumping scene. He thought it was funny when he falls, and then we came into this scene, and he started getting bored. And he was like, "Dad, I don't really want to watch this movie." And he started to get up, and then the spoon happens. My 5-year-old just lost it. He thought that was the funniest thing.
That's a good joke.
He was still talking about that today. He was like, "Dad, you remember that movie where the guy pulls out the spoon?"
You know, the Matrix? No, the old guy.
He's like, "No, Dad, there was no
accent.
spoon." This is where Alejandro has to realize that it's not the spoon that bends, but only himself.
See, that's why he likes this guy, because he has his father's name.
And I like that conflict doesn't get stretched out beyond credulity. I mean, like, they kind of fix it pretty quick, but it's a really good tense scene. It might have been nice if it lasted a little bit longer, but I also like that they're not, like, at each other's throats for a long time.
Yeah.
And it's not that Batman Forever thing where, like, he's got to tell him, Don't go out and get revenge. Of course, it's the opposite. He's teaching him how to get revenge.
I mean,
but it's like,
perhaps.
It's not like, don't go out and get revenge, Robin. Well, I'm going to steal your Batmobile and go joyriding and then keep just yelling at you until you finally give in. And then he gives in. And then Robin just does the right thing at the end. And not really necessarily because he was taught all that much by Batman.
I feel like there's a lot of movies that, like, manufacture drama. A lot of TV shows, too.
Yeah, this does not have that as much.
And so he goes out to be Zorro, which, if you want to talk about getting good at something real fast...
The charm thing is a problem.
He shows him the spoon, and then the very next scene...
He knows exactly what to do at this party, and he shouldn't.
Yeah, like, how... You're going to go... Not only are you going to be good at etiquette, you're also going to be one heck of a dancer.
That's a really good point. How did he learn all that? And there's, like, he never even held a sword before. You can't tell me he knew how to do that kind of dancing.
Yeah.
This really vigorous, intense ballroom dance. There's no way he knew how to do that.
I mean, granted, they try to play it off as if this particular, like, this is not gentlemanly, and he has to apologize, which I actually think is kind of a cool point.
It is, but they're, like, perfectly in sync and choreographed, and...
Like, how are you so good at this, dude?
You imagine if they put on ice skates right now, they'd win a gold medal, having never practiced. Like,
I'd vote for him. Why not? 10 out of 10. It's on a 5-point scale, Vince. I don't care.
It's not really how that works. It's not really voting.
What do you call this stuff again? Figure scutting. Oh, back to the idea of these two guys getting in each other's faces in this past scene and then getting over it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, Zorro himself, being a refined gentleman, being a man of logic and capacity, the thing that in my head he quickly realizes that he's being petty. Where
yes.
So So he sees this guy go out and be Zorro, and or he recognizes that things are missing, that he's out doing something that he probably shouldn't be, and he can say to himself, and you can kind of take this logic and say that, well, he could be concerned for any number of things. One, Alejandro might not be ready yet. He might literally be risking his life unnecessarily.
Yeah, and that's a risk to his plans.
Right.
Like, that's the bigger issue, is you're making yourself a liability to my plans.
Right. And showing Zorro before we're ready to show Zorro is a liability to the overall plan as well.
Well, that's true.
Because we need to establish that,
because now you're changing public perception.
Yeah, especially if we're going to introduce Dude Face McGee here.
Yes.
Versus the sudden appearance of Zorro. Like, we need to establish that you're, as they've said in some Zorro comics I've read before, a dandy. You are not capable, or you are like 100% opposed to being like an avenger for the people of some kind, but rather you are very much so part of the establishment. So in the Mark of Zorro, in the original Zorro, in the majority of Zorro things in general, the idea is that you're trying to convince people that you are either bookish or that you might actually be, as they called it, a dandy, and which seems offensive now that I say that out loud. But anyway,
well, that's that using Bruce Wayne as a mask thing, right?
Yeah. In this one, it would be more
like you want to look like a playboy, because that guy's not gonna put on a mask and go get his hands dirty.
He convinces people that he's establishment, as opposed to convincing people that he is incapable of fighting. Because you are all about the refined things in life, and you're fancy, and you wear perfume,
and you want the upper
echelon
echelon to think that you're as corrupt as they are.
Yeah, and that is thinking
it's about motives, right? Well, and remember, in this scene, he's going to tell all these guys at this table how stupid Zorro is, which is the exact same thing that Bruce Wayne does in Batman Begins.
Right. Terrific point. Hence, I mean, the things that...
And that's why Bruce Wayne in Begins is going around, like, buying things that are not for sale and all that. That's exactly what we're doing here.
Yeah. So, you look back at that past scene...
I mean, he doesn't actually buy anything that's not for sale, but I guess, like, the the big dance in front of everybody is, like, he's being showy. Like...
Yeah. So, I think his irritation with Alejandro is fair. But, I also think he's being petty because he's no longer Zorro. And he has to come to grips with that. And you can almost say that is a character point where he dresses as the Bernardo of this movie. And the idea being, nobody looks at servants, why would he really look at me?
Yeah, sure.
So, especially if you keep your head down and you wear glasses, and he's not the same guy.
So, once again, going back to the scene where they're arguing with each other, one of the things that makes that interesting is that, and it's funny because I guess we're talking about like 45 seconds of a movie, but like, this is great. He just punches him. But they're both wrong to some degree in that scene.
It's very nice of him to hold it, though.
Because like I'm throwing Anthony Hopkins under the bus in that scene where like his motives are not as true as he's pretending like they are at first, but also it is true that Alejandro was too impulsive and shouldn't have gone out and done that yet.
And as you said earlier, it's very cocky to think that you can go out there and take on an entire army.
Yeah. Like there's a reason there was only one Zorro. Not everybody can go out and do that. Now, apparently you can, because all you have to do is, like, get magic training from the last Zorro for a couple of minutes, and then you can do anything. I don't know if I complained about that in the rewind, but if I did, I was really remiss, because it is the biggest problem with this movie, right?
Yeah. Well, other than becoming immediately an actor.
Oh, no. That's all linked together, right? That's all linked together. What I'm saying is, he's good at everything he's taught way too fast.
Yes.
Doesn't matter what we're talking about. I'm saying all of those things. That's the biggest problem with this movie. And you're right. He might be good at being an actor, but he's never lived in this world. He doesn't know anything about these people. He should be like, and I'm not putting this on a pedestal because this was not a great episode, but there was a recent episode of The Flash where they do like a kind of a 007 parody, and Barry Allen goes to a party, and he has to try to do this kind of espionage, and he just completely crashes and burns and almost ruins the entire mission. Like, he doesn't know what he's doing. He goes in with the Elongated Man. The Elongated Man knows what he's doing, but Flash has no idea what he's doing.
It's kind of awesome, actually.
I mean, yeah, it's just all the 007 stuff was way too on the nose. It was just too obvious. And
there's a movie that's it's called Death Sentence. It stars Kevin Bacon. It's kind of an interesting movie with the idea that he is not particularly good at being a vigilante. He is learning to be a vigilante along the way.
I'm sorry, is that the first time Anthony Hopkins gets wind that his daughter is there? Or did he already see her earlier?
He saw her on the beach.
Because he sees the
he was going
painting,
to bum rush him and try to stab him.
And he looks surprised by it, and he's looking at it real close, and it's like, wait a minute. And it might have been neat if that was how they introduced it.
Well, the lady on the painting was his wife.
Oh, was that his wife?
Yes.
Okay, of course it looks just like her.
Yes, so they're very similar.
Okay.
I mean, I think that's...
For a minute I was wondering if that's what it was, but I wasn't sure.
I think that's the impression that they want to... I mean, I think they look different, but they do look like they could potentially be.
Right, I mean, so he's like, oh wow, that's my wife on a painting. Okay.
Yeah, which... That's what I kind of like about Raphael, is that he genuinely cared about Elena, and genuinely cares about the daughter, and so it's... I think that Vega has to come to some kind of understanding that Raphael genuinely cared for his wife, genuinely cared for his daughter, said that his daughter should have been his and meant it. And
well, it's hard to establish all that in a 10-minute opening.
Yeah.
And they do a really good job of that.
I agree.
Especially because you don't really get to meet that character.
And especially considering that she's not like a captive, she's not a servant, but rather literally thinks that she's Raphael's daughter.
Yes. I thought the reason you liked Raphael was because he is crude but cool. That's...
Well, I
thought you liked him because you liked the color red.
Actually, I do like the color red.
Was Raphael your favorite Ninja Turtle?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. I never knew that.
Yep.
Do you know my favorite Ninja Turtle?
I'm going to guess Leonardo.
Donatello.
Dang. Donatello's Victor's. Victor being my brother. People out there in YouTube land going...
But that was especially solidified with the IDW comics.
I've danced like this before. I mean, I'll be honest with you. It's hard doing it while you're wearing a dress, but... I'm so funny. I'm sorry.
He was dancing with me. We put a hat around the room. We got like $5.50. It was great.
You know, this idea of class got $5.50. I like that somebody had 50 cents. Like, no, they split $1 because they're like, I would rather waste $1.
The offering plate.
I put a bone in there after I finished eating. This is an offering plate.
Make a wish.
I thought it was the trash, man.
This is one of, the great movie dances. This is an incredible scene.
Although for some reason, I mean, I realize it's supposed to be from their perspective as they're walking by.
Yes.
But for some reason, I always thought that far away shot was weird. Because everything else is so, like, well framed, and it makes it look very dramatic.
When you get to the end of this, especially when he bends over her like that,
and
of course
that does seem inappropriate.
It's really provocative, and I just want him to look up to the crowd and say, well, apparently you're not ready for that yet, but your kids are gonna love it.
I want him to have a rose in his teeth and make some kind of weird noise like...
Yeah, I'm glad they didn't put a rose in her mouth. That would have been a bit much.
I agree.
That would have been going too far. I also think it's interesting how he kind of saves the situation, or either he sort of saves the situation or Raphael's just holding it all in.
Yeah.
Because he could have dismissed him now, but I think he thinks this guy's going to be an asset and he wants him as part of his plan, so I don't know. Maybe Alejandro doesn't save this. I mean, he says all the right things.
I mean, you can think of it as maybe sexism even, where it's my daughter's fault.
That's a really good point. Yeah, and I guess last time I saw this, I was also kind of wondering that. It's hard to read his expression.
Where
it's like, how mad is he at him or her or the situation?
Interesting idea that I think is largely your ultimate point, where you're looking at this guy being this corrupt individual, and he can put his personal agitation aside in order to execute a bigger plan that he needs these corrupt dons to achieve.
Yeah, because if you watch this for the first time, when he says, "I want to show you something," you're like, "Oh, he's dead." He's going to take him out back and have him shot.
That guy is going to look into a magnifying glass with blades in it.
No, what he's actually going to do is tell them about this
microscope
crazy conspiracy he has to give Santa Anna his own gold in exchange for land. Which is a great plot, by the way.
Yeah. Mined by enslaved people. Like, literally, people convincing themselves that criminal, terrible human rights abuses are necessary in order to achieve what they want. Like, it's...
And it doesn't feel like a standard villain plot, because the villain is, like, a major government official. And, I mean, yeah, we have, like, bad politicians and things, don't get me wrong, but, like, he's not... It is, in some ways, a superhero movie, but he's not a supervillain. Like...
Right. And that's what I always loved about Zorro, is that there's...
And you get the sense that a lot of guys like this have gotten away with stuff like this. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like,
I don't think he's special. This is just how the government operates.
Yeah. Which I think is the idea. The Dons, they were content merely to cheat and lie to you. Well, you're cheating and lying, you corrupt piece of junk.
Yeah, but that's how... you get the people on your side, is you've got...
You cheat more
than... Yeah, exactly. You've got more than a grain of truth in what you're saying, but you're leaving out the important part that you're not above any of the stuff they did. It's all about perception.
Right.
It's that line... Which I'm probably going to start quoting this a lot now that I've finally seen this movie. I had to review 12 Monkeys recently, and it's like the line that Brad Pitt has...
How'd you get him to sit still?
You know, it took a while. It's like, I just can't flip it aside how I feel about this much. Sit down! But anyway...
This one sees no evil, this one hears...
But it's like the line Brad Pitt has in that movie where which is like the kind of the big important line in that movie, where he says that it's not about right or wrong, it's public opinion that matters.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating, man. I've only seen it once, and it's been years. I don't have to watch that movie.
I think that like, I didn't love it. It's got its issues. I'm not totally sure where I stand with it, but the ideas are interesting, and I think that applies to this movie.
Yeah. There's I don't know, maybe unrelated. There's an episode of the 90s Regier. I forget the gentleman's first name at the moment. I want to say Don Regier, but that might not be right. The 90s Zorro series, literally shot in Spain.
Oh, interesting.
And there's an episode where Zorro's dead.
Where did they figuratively shot in Spain? Where they just had like a drawn backdrop. They're like, look at Spain.
We gave the impression of Spain, literally an impression. We went to the Spanish ground and took a piece of charcoal and a piece of paper.
This is an artist rendering of Spain. This is what Spain is like to me, the artist that made Spain.
That made Spain. It's a particular
it's an interpretation.
type of bundt cake.
Really?
You know? I named it Spain so that it's artistic liberty. You can't argue with me. But there's this episode of the 90s Zorro series where you have somebody running, which you have this election, and you know what? Actually, that might have been a separate episode, the election. But either way, Don Alejandro becomes...
They're voting for dancers.
Oh yeah, it's an interim... They're voting for dancers. There's an interim governor at the moment, and so Don Alejandro takes the seat, while the man, certain words are just leaving me. Whatever. The alcalde. Well, the alcalde's
okay.
out of town.
You're rusty. You haven't done these in a while.
Yeah. Who's rusty? I'm Vince.
Vince doesn't remember how videos get made.
So Don Alejandro is the interim alcalde. So alcalde's out of town doing his own thing, and Don Alejandro is in place, and he's like signing paperwork saying, "Yeah, we need to work on that irrigation system. Taxes for that. He's like, oh, we don't need taxes for that thing, so we're just not going to buy that. So he's like, this is easy. Like, I don't understand why this is such a problem, why we have to divert taxes. But the idea is that the people in power are corrupt.
Yes.
So the people in power are taking taxes and using them for fun or or to ship out to a different location to the empire that essentially controls them. Therefore, that is at the heart of the issue, the problem. Taxation without representation, you could call it. Or you could say taxation without actually spending the taxes on things that are supposed to be spent on you.
I think that's about the same thing, though, yeah?
Well, I guess the idea is that every so often I wonder, when I hear people say that, like the idea that taxation, what constitutes representation? Is it representation just because you are a citizen and they have whatever voting system in which your vote either is supposed to in some way count?
Yeah.
So therefore, you could say, well, sure, you're actually represented. You have a person who represents your needs within the government, as opposed to we just ship our stuff out to the government that's in control. We're not actually represented there, or it takes too long to get our opinion back. Therefore, we aren't. At the time, everything traveled by ship. There was no internet. Yada yada yada. So it takes too long to actually get our opinions back. So funny and tragic scene.
Yeah, I think that scene's really important.
I talked right over the top.
No, you're fine. But it completely encapsulates what is twisted and perverse and wrong about the system and about the people in charge. That they really do not have regard for the people below them that they're in charge of, as if they're lower creatures and not human. And this guy, I'm gonna say something crazy. Jack is like the comedian of this movie, like Watchmen comedian, because he's saying like life is just a joke. It's not what it looks like. It's not what you think it is. And like I'm not any. They're not, these people are not any better than I am.
Yeah. Now, granted, you're also coming down to it. Here's this guy who's worked to the point that he's probably delirious.
And yes, that's true.
And he's willing to sacrifice his life in order just to put a pick into somebody. Like, are you crazy at this moment? Or were you just waiting for the people to come down and look so that you can get a whack at them? It's sad. I love the little bit of acting that he does too. Because you genuinely feel for him. He sits there, or he lays there, and he gets to die looking at the face of somebody that he cares about. And
that's true. Yeah.
I hope. He even goes.
See, I didn't even think about that because it's so long before you get to him again. You almost forget that they had a relationship.
Yeah,
like I've seen that guy somewhere before.
And you see Alejandro start to struggling, trying not to show too much emotion, because he has to turn around and face the other Dons immediately. They're right there.
So this is a really tender scene and wonderfully well written. I think in some ways this is one of the best scenes of the movie.
Yeah. Now, sometimes I wonder, granted, Zorro sees something in Alejandro, and she also has the perception that she sees these same things in Alejandro.
That's a good point, yeah. And things that he doesn't initially necessarily see in himself, right?
Right.
Like, I don't think he has a high of... Well, in some ways he doesn't have a high opinion of himself. In some ways he does, right? It's that I'm a really insecure person that also wants wealth and fame, and or at the very least, some recognition.
Yeah, I mean, wealth and fame, sure, because,
maybe that would give me confidence, is sometimes the deal there, right? Where
that's interesting. I like that idea. Granted, wealth and fame, literally. He's looking for money, not necessarily becoming the rich Don, but rather he's literally looking for money by means that are not on the up and up. Oh yeah, but the idea of getting fame derailed for a second.
It's a good scene, man.
But the idea of getting fame is also true because we're talking about becoming a famous bandit as opposed to becoming a famous.
That's a good point.
Which,
yeah.
if you think about it,
so
what's the
he's wanted
difference,
that
right?
all along. Yeah.
He can become a famous bandit in the idea of holding people up at either gunpoint or knife point or sword point. Or he can become a famous robber baron.
See, all he had to do was turn on the faucets in all the houses he robs. And then...
robber. Wait. I also have to ask the question, how would Zorro feel about having his daughter's clothes cut off? I'm like, come on.
Well, he doesn't have to know about that.
What you don't know won't hurt you.
That's not a scene that he ever finds out about. And while he's dying, I don't know if he puts their hands together, if he knows about that scene. But he probably does. But
that's cute.
Like if he was standing to the side where nobody could see him, would he have the same smile he had on his face when they were dancing? I'm just saying. I think probably not. He'd be like, this is going a little too far. I know I didn't raise her, but this is wrong.
I like that him saying her name was tough for him.
I like that too, and I like that she's real hesitant walking away, where she knows there's more to that, but she doesn't know what it is, and
yeah, because she feels a connection to him in some way, and she doesn't know what it is.
Yeah,
well,
and she even says there's a familiarity, and that's because when she was a baby, that was her father, and so she might recognize his voice to some degree.
Yeah,
but I like that.
Oh, and if you think about it, even the idea at the end of the movie where he essentially becomes the next Zorro, therefore he has a similar relationship with his own child, therefore all of the loving, singing things. Oh,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a real bookend, full circle thing there. Except at the end, there's not tragedy, as far as we know. Now, I was gonna say, I've never bothered with the sequel. Because I've only ever heard bad things.
It's real dull. I'm like,
is it just dull?
In comparison, it's just an action movie.
I was expecting it to be more over the top, obvious Hollywood schlock, because that's what all the
it's exactly.
Is that what it is? Okay, but that's what makes it dull. You're saying because that's what it looked like in the previews, and I was like, they're at least not advertising this movie right, because it looks like a schlocky, obvious sequel. It doesn't look like more of this movie. It doesn't look thoughtful.
This is a movie, or a film, if you wish.
Yeah.
And the other one, it's just more swashbuckling.
This doesn't feel like a brand recognition cash-in kind of movie.
I agree. Oh, he's so tough now. Look at that.
And it's not banking on nostalgia. It's not let's, impress Zorro fans with all these, references to things that existed before, like we do so often with things now, with soft reboots and things. And it's funny because it kind of watches like a soft reboot because it's a Zorro passing on to another Zorro.
Right.
But it's not like Anthony Hopkins played Zorro before, or that this is in another continuity.
Right.
Now, I've never read any Zorro stuff. I'm assuming that those are both characters that have been Zorro before. Or did they make up Anthony Hopkins' character?
Well, man,
I
kept
know.
Accidentally calling the wrong one Alejandro.
You're not sure?
I am at the point, I'm like, wait, is he Don Diego? They have not said his name that I've recognized. And they're calling him Bernardo, which is obviously just the name of the servant. But,
yeah.
Although, what's kind of cool about Bernardo is that he was the eyes and ears pretending to be deaf so people would say things in front of him. He was supposed to be this in the original idea that Bernardo was useful. He was essentially a spy.
Oh.
And so Bernardo was something important. He wasn't just a servant.
Now, I should ask you, is this your favorite Zorro thing? Or are there other Zorro things you like better than this?
This is real good for me. Isabella Allende's novel, also super good.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, man, I highly recommend it.
When was that published?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
And again, to hesitate to put the Motorola noise on, I'd check it, but turn my phone down.
I mean, is that more recent, or...?
You know, I don't recall exactly when it came
But
out.
I mean, when did you read it?
I read it probably about
I'm looking for
5 to 10 years ago.
any information here.
It's not new, but it's definitely not the original. Because the original would have come out in 1919, written by Johnston Macaulay, as
Yeah,
opposed to
sure.
Macaulay Johnston or Macaulay Culkin.
2005.
Yeah,
Chilean author.
super good. It's I recall it being.
I may
wonderful.
try to read that.
It's also exists as an audiobook,
It's
which
a
is
prequel to the first book, to the novella.
it's great. Highly recommend it.
Interesting.
But then again,
To Macaulay Culkin's original 1919 novella.
Matt Wagner's Dynamite Zorro, also very good.
Oh, and apparently that book borrows some things even from this movie.
Well, that makes sense. Could explain why I like it.
Yeah, this has always been really highly regarded. And not in that, like, well, it's as good of an adaptation on film as we could expect for a thing. Now, it helps that Zorro is known as a film property as well or more than it is a pulp property, which is unusual for a lot of superhero-type stuff.
Well, Mask of Zorro was pretty important, and I don't know if you know that, but
Shadow was yes, of course. Like, Shadow was a decent Hollywood interpretation of the Shadow, but, like, that's not a TV movie thing primarily.
Mm-hmm.
And so it has that, like, as good as we could expect at the time kind of thing. Like, I like that movie, but, like, it's not as good for the Shadow as this is for Zorro. Like of course.
This is not Camp Zorro.
Not
This
at
is
all.
Zorro.
Yeah.
And the premise of Zorro...
This is one of those things where, like, if this is all you ever watched, it's pretty easy to say you like Zorro, because you know what, you get Zorro, yeah.
Yes. The premise of Zorro is, in certain ways, set up to be a crowd pleaser, because it's not only action, it's not only dramatic, it's also funny. Like, intentionally, these things are part of this.
And, like, inherently, yeah.
And then you look at the Shadow.
And, like, it's a really charismatic character.
Yeah.
And so, again, it has a lot in common with Robin Hood, right?
Yes. 100%.
I mean, he's basically for the
you might
the
even say
1920s,
Zorro's
like
a
a
ripoff.
modern, yeah. Well, I say modern. I mean, it was always set, you know, a century earlier, or in the previous century anyway.
Made for another generation anyway.
Has there ever been? I'm sure there has. Has there ever been Zorro stuff set in present day?
Yes, it's weird.
Does it suck?
It's there's a cartoon.
Also,
that
you
is
always have to have the superhero logo with fire.
Punisher, Zorro,
Daredevil,
Dark
Knight Rises.
Yeah. I'm gonna set a blue beetle symbol on fire in a field, and people are like, "Why are you burning my corn?" Incidentally, that's something I wanted to see was a
Blue Beetle symbol.
that's right. I wanted to see a Ted Kord Blue Beetle movie where he
I just want to replace Zorro in this movie every time with Blue Beetle. Damn it, it's Blue Beetle!
where he learns to be Blue Beetle effectively from the question. I really wanted that.
Oh, yeah, sure.
I mean, it's not like it
But
couldn't
Blue
happen. I
Beetle
just
is
don't think it will.
Also a legacy hero, where sometimes he learns it from a previous Blue Beetle.
Well, I
Right?
mean, Dan Garrett, I think his name was, essentially saves Ted Kord and dies in the process, to my understanding. It's been a while. But Ted Kord decides to carry on the title, or the mantle of Blue Beetle. But the difference is Dan Garrett had superpowers. And,
Right.
and Ted Kord has money.
But didn't Ted Kord teach Jaime?
I don't the next guy got superpowers from a scarab.
That's Jaime.
Yeah, and I think I didn't read any of his. I think that, but I
Well,
did
and it's
read some.
adapted in places too. It's also Young Justice, and like
I
there's
think
other ways
Ted
to
Kord
get that.
died first.
Is that what happened? Okay,
I think so.
I'm not a big Blue Beetle guy. I think this is the scene where he. Okay, no, it's not. It's not Raphael. It's his right hand man. I think he is going to hand him a sword when he
Yeah.
could have just stabbed him. Well, why does he do that, Vince? If it's not just an honor thing, like
To prove how good he is.
yeah, maybe so.
I mean, I'm not trying to. I'm not trying to say you're wrong, but it
No,
could,
I'm asking the question legitimately. I'm saying that if it's
Por
not
qué no
honor,
dos, you
what
know?
is it? Yeah.
Why not both? So he proves...
Yes, he's going to hand it to him.
He proves that he's great because he believes in his skills.
It feels like a code thing to me. Where, like, he has enough respect for this guy to do that. Because he's not going to do it with everybody. He's going to make them just jump out a window. Like,
yeah. I feel like somebody's going to get spanked.
You could also maybe make the... Maybe I'm giving it too much credit. You could also maybe give the argument that the movie's got to come up with any, like, contrivance it can to have sword fighting scenes, but it feels real deliberate. Like...
And I like the idea.
Or is he just being cocky? Is it just like, I know I can beat this, doofus head? Is that what it is?
Yeah, and you know what? Maybe he doesn't fully value his life yet.
Of an honor code completely off? Is there none of that in this movie?
No, I mean, I think it's there. But you posed the question and I answered.
Yeah, well, just now I'm not confident about my position. I'm not sure.
How dare you point counterpoint so well, sir? I like the idea that he's not ready to take him on.
Tell me what my points are. What are my points?
They're at the ends of your swords.
Right. That's the end that goes in the other man.
Sir, I don't think that you're going to do quite as well against this gentleman.
Who's half your age?
Yeah.
But
although he is holding his own. He's
valiant effort, yeah. I mean, they choreographed it that way. But yeah. And see, now he's got two swords. Because it would be unfair to fight him with one sword. How does he keep the hat on?
Well, you see, the body's the part that's doing the flipping. And hell, I don't know.
It's super glue, right?
That's right.
It's
like how the Phantom takes off his mask and the black paint goes away.
It's bobby pins connected to the mask is what it is.
And some of the stuff, he has to be like connected to wires or something.
Okay. You ever thought of this before? He's in a circle.
Ah. I like visual...
Just callbacks and parallels and...
I thought about calling it a callback, but then I was like,
It's more than that, yeah.
What do you call that? In self-referential is not the same word. Symbolism. Yeah, visual symbolism.
It's symbolism, and it's also visual progression of an idea.
Yeah.
It took longer to say, but I think that's a little bit closer to what you're looking for.
Breathe. You'll pass out, man. Do you know how many times I say that in a day?
Breathing is not dramatic in that case, Vince. See, that was so much more dramatic than what you could have done, which was just breathing regularly. Get him.
And why did you guys not change course?
Dropping that map is classic. That also feels like an Errol Flynn move to me.
I love the stuff like everybody piles on and he just happens to climb out the other side.
Yeah, that's always fun.
Did it in Ninja Turtles. Did it in Zorro.
Yeah, let's say Zorro ripped off the Ninja Turtles. Let's say that. It's not true, but it's funny. So this is going to be that famous scene.
Man, when I was a teenager. This was a great scene.
I bet. Yeah, and, like, it's just as erotic as it needs to be, right? Like...
Yeah, you don't want to go crazy far. Although there is, Zorro erotica out there.
Oh, I'm sure there is.
I've not actually seen it. I've also not seen Zorro of the Gay Blade. Like, there are some Zorro things I just haven't... I have nothing against it. I mean, if that's your thing, you do what you want, man, but...
But you're not going to look at it. You're not interested in that.
Eventually, I will probably watch Zorro of the Gay Blade.
He's going to claim on this channel.
Which...
In behind closed doors, he's going to tell me about all the Zorro erotica he's seen.
Incidentally, for those who don't know, Zorro of the Gay Blade is a comedy, and I feel like it's going to be really offensive at this point. So I've not watched it. That being said, there's a lot of Zorro stuff, and I just watched Mask of Zorro and Don Q this year.
Oh, wow, cool. Well, you were ready for this, man.
I hadn't seen it before.
You had never seen Mask of Zorro before?
No. And
I was meant to show you that, because, I mean, I saw it years ago when we were in college together.
It's public domain. It's pretty easy to get. So
remember, when we were in college, you got to take a film class I wanted to take. And I got to take a film class you wanted to take. Yeah. You did violence, and I did silent film, and we just kind of compared notes. I think we did them the same semester, or maybe it was just one removed, but...
Yeah, I didn't realize silent film was happening that semester. And there are also some things...
And I couldn't get into violence.
And
I've never been able to really get into violence. But...
That's pretty funny. Well, we'll kick your butt next. You just wait. We'll get out some swords and...
Vince, I'm really sorry for doing this, but do you think you could hold the fort for just a couple minutes on this commentary?
Sure.
Can you manage it? I'll be right back.
I don't know. This scene's real distracting, man.
I'm sure people won't mind dead air for this scene.
Dead air. That's a fair point. Heck, I don't even know if anybody on this thing heard this because he was walking away as he said that. I'm sure not everybody would mind dead air on this scene. Yeah. I like that she holds her own. I mean, granted, a lot of the things that a lot of the Zorro stories that I've read, because I've also seen, read, blah blah blah, several different types of Zorro. So I've listened to Zorro, I've watched Zorro, I've read Zorro, and inevitably you end up seeing the origin story a few times. So the idea that he goes to Spain, he learns how to be Zorro. He, not necessarily that was the intent, but he goes to Spain for a traditional education, and comes back and finds corruption in the town from which he came, and then he comes back. I mean, wait, I just said that. So he comes back, and he decides that he's going to fight corruption with the skills that he's learned while in Spain. So therefore, she goes to Spain. She learns the same skills. Therefore, it makes sense that Zorro's daughter knows how to fence, knows how to hold her own, because not only was it important to the De La Vegas, but also important to Raphael, who takes Zorro's daughter to Spain. Therefore, it makes sense that she would get the education that one of the De La Vegas would have had before. So I find that it doesn't surprise me that Zorro's daughter is a very capable swords woman. It makes sense to me, and also it's very pleasing to me. It makes me happy that the idea that that Raphael could not help himself, he still educated Zorro's daughter in swordplay. I think that's a wonderful idea.
Sorry with that, Vince. What did I miss? What happened? Man, it's like every time I go to the movie theater, I have to get up for a minute.
I don't know. I was just sitting here watching.
Movie?
The viewers have all been complaining. They're like, where'd Cap go?
Well, that can't be true. I'm looking at the sound and there's waveforms. So clearly you said things.
This is true.
Oh man, I missed the part that you were excited about as a teenager. So, I think that scene could have been classless, and it's not.
I agree.
And I think part of what makes it work is, they have to have the rapport they have, even though she doesn't know who he is. You know, it's that classic mistaken identity things and superhero things, and it's kind of Shakespearean. But also, if they just cut above to her head, and they didn't have the hair, I don't think it's as classy.
Yeah.
Like, I think the way it's shot is part of what helps that, yeah.
Because it's almost like he protected her in certain ways.
It's more just about how it's shot, I guess. Like
her dignity has not been ruined.
Yeah, they're able to get around it.
It has.
It has. No, sure.
But not as bad as if they just let the mind go wild.
He definitely embarrasses her in that scene, sure. But, like, I think it's because she's not standing there exposed in front of him while you're not seeing all of it. It's that, like, we get to see everything he sees, and he doesn't get to see anything. I think that's what makes it kind of... Does that make sense? That makes it kind of classy.
Well, I mean...
As classy as that can be.
Indeed. A classless, classier scene than it could have been.
Yes, precisely.
So, I think essentially what you're talking about is that certain things, when seen, are... How do I want to put this? Jaws is scarier because you don't see the shark.
Yes.
Therefore, if they just cut up to her head, meaning the camera, not necessarily meaning a sword. So if they just if they panned up to her head real quick and implied that she was standing there buck naked,
yes,
then it would have looked like he just did something really cruel, which I mean he did, but because she's still mostly covered, you have the moment where you say, well, that was intentional. Yeah, but also the physics of the scene make no sense. That it's like somebody jerked down on that thing so that it would come off with the slight cuts that were in it.
As cool as this stunt is, I think this is the thing most in this movie that I do not buy he's doing. This is the guy that half an hour ago couldn't jump on a horse. No.
Although, I think they're trying to use it as payoff. But
they are, but at least they're consistent with how quickly he learns everything. Like, he's basically getting downloads from the Matrix. Like, Anthony Hopkins is the operator from the Matrix, just putting information in his head. Like, I know Kung Fu. He spends like 5 seconds with Anthony Hopkins, and I know Kung Fu. That's what's happening.
Well,
like, at the end of this movie, he can fly a helicopter like Trinity, and he can shoot any kind of gun.
Are we sure? Has anybody checked Anthony Hopkins for having, like, a male USB drive on him that he can plug into the...
He might, yeah. Those would
just download things into the back of his skull.
Interesting crossover with no dramatic potential.
Heck, maybe in this reality, spoons...
Oh, see, there was already a Matrix connection.
Carriers for data.
See, I say there's no dramatic connection. Maybe there is. Maybe what we do is after the 90s didn't work, they said, well, maybe what we need to do is we need to make all of our slaves connected to the Matrix think that it's the 1880s.
I think part of it is he just spoon-fed all of them.
Oh, there is no spoon-feeding. That's really funny.
Take that,
Dude,
reality.
Look, he hasn't been doing his job. There are a lot of candles that he's not whipped yet. And
that's how I like my peanut butter.
If you want to have any credibility as a candle whipper, sir...
I love the idea that your job title is candle whipper. What do you do for a living? Well, it's more of a hobby.
Yeah. It's the Castlevania version of climbing the walls. Like,
it's one of my favorite things about Castlevania was that guy that could, like, walk on the ceiling.
Yeah.
It was one of the later Castlevania games.
I mean, I don't know which game that is. Like, I haven't played that. I know I've seen footage of it.
I want to say the third one.
I forget.
It was like one game that never brought it back that I was
I'm not a big Castlevania guy, but I've watched videos of people that are into Castlevania, which is why I've finally played some of it. But I didn't grow up with those games.
Yeah, Castlevania was kind of like Devil May Cry. It was just impossible at certain parts. Like,
yeah.
You had to be real good.
The only one I've really played for any amount of time is Castlevania 4 on Super Nintendo.
Yeah. That's the one that I had.
Which is great.
But my brother had all the rest of them.
Oh, see, we still have this argument. We just...
Right.
Yeah.
So, because he was classy, which is a weird word to use, but because he recognizes... I mean, I guess we can kind of expand upon this notion.
Yeah, sure.
He has this notion...
I forgot about the scene, and I felt weird about it, because I was like, I'm praising 45 seconds of an argument. Like, I thought there was more of this in this movie. I forgot about the scene.
Perhaps the reason the argument ended so quickly was because he realized that having this fight was not necessarily his best move at this moment.
He's still controlling the situation.
Right. So he's like, well, I'll run damage control. We'll move forward with the plan in an order that I didn't intend to, and maybe we can save face. Now, the reason that doesn't necessarily work is that Capitan Love recognizes that is Alejandro Murrieta. So, because at some point he's like, I think this is your brother. And he shows him the head, just trying to shake him up.
Yes.
And he's like, no, it's not my brother. He's like, yeah, it is. Here you go. Look at this head.
And that would freak out anybody. Would you like a drink?
Be like, yeah, that would freak me out. I don't know that dude.
It would freak you out no matter who it was. It's a head in a jar.
Which almost proves Whoops.
What did you just do?
I bumped the thing.
You pulled the sound out?
Yeah. It almost proves...
We're going to copyright flag for that, Vince.
Oh, no!
I'm just kidding.
Diego.
You guys got to
there
hear
you go.
Half a second of this movie.
Diego right there. They said it in the...
Man, next time I'm just going to write down the cast list, man.
You know what? I think I'm going to put a Z on my neck.
You gotta have somebody else do it for you. Like, yeah, I get a tattoo.
I've often thought about what tattoo would I get. A Z would be pretty cool, but it would also make it that I crossed paths with Zorro on the wrong end of Zorro's sword. So I don't know that I like the message.
Yeah, that's a good point. Sure.
Yeah. I've also thought about a Wolfman. Man, the things that I'm into.
Well, I mean, The tattoos I've thought of are also kind of odd.
Yeah, a Ghostbuster symbol on my shoulder.
Yeah.
Wolfman.
I want to do... I've talked about this before, but I want to do the ticked moon with the bite taken out of it.
I like that. You should
Because I'm sure nobody else has that.
You should get a full body tattoo and make yourself look like one of the vehicles from Jurassic Park.
Well, and I also thought about a raptor tattoo. Specifically a raptor opening a door. Because I always thought that would be great. And because I've seen one that looks awesome. And another idea I had once, if we're talking about tattoos now, another idea I had once is the word captain written in Kryptonian symbols.
That's pretty cool. I like that notion myself.
But anyway...
Oh, we're watching Zorro. When did this start?
So yeah, this is absolutely a story for both of these guys. And, like... You know, obviously, if you had to put a gun in my head and say who is the protagonist... You know, it's Alejandro, but
Diego,
he's got an arc too, because he's got to find himself again. I mean, they both have to learn what Zorro stands for, what he's about.
Yeah,
even though
I feel like this is the plan breaking down.
Yes.
But I can't believe that I suddenly lost confidence
because he's not gonna. Maybe you shouldn't have said you watch this twice a year. Like
I've seen this movie how many times, and then after I called him Alejandro too many times, I went, wait a second. That's not his name.
This is a realization that I buy, and I don't think her running into that woman in town is too convenient. And like, it's a pretty tight script, right? Like,
yeah,
all of the major narrative components I buy. I don't think much of anything is too convenient. The only, again, too convenient stuff is how quickly he learns everything. But like, that's it as far as the actual story beats.
I mean, they had
it
kind
all makes
of
sense. It's all well set up. It's all there's excellent setup and payoff. It feels character driven. It doesn't feel like we put a plot on a wall and we have characters make decisions to get to those beats.
I forget exactly which.
Even if we did that, they did a good job of making me feel like that's not what they did.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's much more important.
Earlier in the movie, when they meet, he says something like, when the master's ready, the pupil will present himself, or vice versa. Mm-hmm. I forget exactly at this moment. But I feel like they were using that as justification for, like, this is the perfect moment. He has met, especially not because he just happened to run into a guy. Oh, you got my dad's name.
Yes.
If that were the case, then I should be teaching something to everybody named Jim. So the end of the day, what I'm trying to get at is,
well, it doesn't, or that information doesn't lead her to this scene. Like, she's in this scene and she has that realization. Because of what the woman in town said, and also. She was already wondering about this guy in the scene with the horse.
Yeah.
So, like, there's a progression of events there.
And maybe this isn't necessarily the plan breaking down, but this is the plan changing because he realizes, I don't need to kill Raphael necessarily. I don't need to get revenge that way. All I need to do is install enough doubt inside of her so that she will be willing to seek the truth. So
yeah, there's that, or is he finding his humanity again? I just can't kill this man in front of his daughter the way she sees it. Like, I care too much about her to do that to her. I mean, like, it's like he's kind of like falling apart again in a way, and he's got to build himself back up to the man he was before.
Yeah. I mean, I think these things run adjacent to one another.
Do you?
So he essentially says, I don't need to murder you. Because, I mean, especially murdering him would not make her go, yeah, you're probably a good guy.
Yeah.
You're not going to get what you want by getting your revenge.
His endgame, even though he's found her, is not to, like rekindle a relationship with her.
Yeah.
In the first place. I mean, he would love that if it happened. But, like, he's still, even knowing she's there and having had a conversation with her, is willing to just... kill him and walk away and never see her again. But the fact that she was in the room when that happened...
Yeah, I mean, he did say...
That's why he stopped, so...
He did say, call her. So he said, call Elena. So he had her come from another room.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, but then, like... But is the deal,
so the
like,
plan
just
had to have changed because he asked for it to happen.
Oh, that's a good point. I forgot about that, yeah.
I mean, it's well played, and I think that he has to come to this realization at some point. Now, granted, the question becomes, did he do all this stuff so that he could position himself to speak to his daughter so that he could, at some point, like, all I need is 2 significant moments with her?
Maybe so, and I think it's important to note that even if you can call him a dual protagonist, he's not the Aizen character. We always kind of have a wall up with him a little bit. We're not in his head.
Yeah. Yeah, because so I mean, we spent most of this movie speculating about his motives,
his motivation. Yeah, and again, that's not a criticism, right? Like that's intentional, and it's fine because he is supposed to be mysterious, and we're supposed to wonder if he's lost himself and why he's really doing all of this. Like he's supposed to be morally ambiguous up until the end.
I feel like this scene is where we first see Alejandro becoming Zorro. Because
absolutely it is, yeah.
This scene, the thing that's important is, one, he doesn't ride in guns blazing. That's not a thing for Zorro. But he does...
He rides in swords blazing. And horses blazing.
Swords swinging and shouting, I have swords! He comes in under... especially because it's very similar to earlier in the movie. Like, you come in hidden and then you reveal yourself. To be Zorro, not to be... Anyway. Hey, everyone, look. But
you take your sword and you cut your own clothes off, and then...
So he comes in and he gives water to a person who desperately needs something. Water and caring, and to look at his humanity. And that's what makes Zorro Zorro, and that's what makes... and that's what... Diego has to find in order to become Zorro again. That's what Alejandro has to find in order to become Zorro.
You know, I think that's why this movie resonates so much, because those are the 2 things I most need: water and caring.
Do you need food or shelter? No, I need water and love.
Water and love.
Did you just think of Brian Regan as well?
And love!
It's an essentials kit. It's filled with food,
I always
water,
do Brian
shelter,
Regan and don't even mean to do him. I didn't even know who he was, and I was doing that voice. and then I saw his stand up and fell in love with it. And then people would be like, "Cap, you're just doing Brian Regan." I'm like, "Nuh-uh." We're doing each other, man. We got a symbiotic relationship.
Who's Brian Regan?
Who's Brian Regan? Slip, trip, and fall.
I feel like that ladder would have just broken. I mean, it did break, but I don't feel like that would have stopped that based on how easily.
Okay, so speaking of symbolism, I just thought of this. Are we doing an intentional scales of justice thing here?
If they are, I don't mind it.
Well, I've seen this movie a few times and I never thought about that until just now. So it's
obviously
subtle,
it's never
there.
bothered me.
Yeah.
How you guys know he's up there? How were you taken by surprise? You didn't think to look up?
Yeah, dim-witted henchmen are important for heroes to win things. If they're not putties, you'd lose. These guys are, by the way, putties.
Also, stormtroopers.
Except instead of hitting the Z, you have to slash a Z in them.
I was watching I watched the 2 first Disney Star Wars movies the other day.
We meet again, just like we did 5 minutes ago.
I saw you this morning. Early this morning, but still. Wait, which one's my father? So I was watching the Star Wars movies, and I had the thought in the way of dim-witted henchmen. The idea of, like, so Finn decides to run away. I think it's a tragic loss for the First Order?
Yeah, First Order, yep.
Because he seems to be the only stormtrooper that can shoot anything. So the fact that he ran away is a problem.
Well, it means that he must have become self-aware while the rest of them were still brainwashed, and that's how he got out of that, because immediately he would get aim.
Terrific point.
You know, at Disneyland, there's a Star Wars-themed restaurant where a number 1 is called a First Order.
I love this.
It's pretty great.
That's awesome.
Oh, look at that's great.
Such a pretty movie.
I must have looked away when I watched this last time because I forgot about that. The sun glowing on the sword. It's awesome. Because you know what we haven't talked about with this at all? We keep talking about how this is like a classic adventure swashbuckling film. We haven't talked about this as a Western at all.
Oh,
like
good
really
point.
important the ways in which this is a Western.
Good point. Although, I mean, I think we think of Westerns as guns, but
there's guns all over this movie. It's just the protagonist isn't using them, which also, say it with me, he has in common with Batman. Even though he's willing to kill people, he doesn't use swords.
When it comes to...
All right, sorry, he does use swords. He doesn't use guns. Why does it... Okay, is there like a thematic reason for that? Is he not because he won't kill people, but is he not using guns because that's the weapon of the establishment? And the sword is like the common man kind of weapon, but the sword is also also like a sport for the upper echelon?
Yeah, perhaps
so I don't know.
The genesis of snowboarding.
Yeah, that's a little 90s.
Yeah. Although, I mean, smart. It's a quick way to get down there as opposed to falling like Love did.
But anyway.
So, that's a terrific point. I mean, in my head, Zorro, it would have been that the sword is the weapon of... Oh boy, that actually punches holes in the idea of Zorro. That's being good at using a sword would be a weapon of the aristocracy as opposed to a weapon of the government, which would be guns.
Yeah.
So, if you're good with a sword, that means you have higher training, higher learning. If you're good with a gun, it means that somebody put a gun in your hand, exclusively feeds you beans, it makes you live in a room full of other men.
Yeah.
So, I mean, not necessarily. You could also just be good at shooting foxes on your territory, but so.
Well, and to be fair, like the highest, the people in the highest places of power, I think, also have guns.
Yeah.
I mean, she's got a gun. Like, right now. So, maybe that's a way of saying that, like... I don't know. It's complicated. Because, Zorro, like, the first Zorro in this is a member of the upper echelon. And he's using a sword which is a more, like, enlightened, sophisticated kind of weapon.
Yes. And it is definitely more sophisticated. It takes skill.
Like, a lot of skill.
I mean, it takes skill to use a gun, sure. But aiming and shooting is not the same thing as defending. Another thing this has in common with The Mask. Did you miss me? Which really, a pretty great moment. Did you really think I would kill my own child?
Yes.
And obviously, the one who cared the most, not Raphael, because he put his sword down. Yes, Dad. Wait, what?
Well, that's true. When he says that, I guess you have to wonder for a minute if he would have, because he has put his plans above everything else up till now. He just hasn't had to make those kinds of sacrifices yet. Like... Yeah. I guess it's an argument you could have. Like, would he have? If he does, it doesn't mean he doesn't care about his daughter, but it means he doesn't care about her as much as he cares about power.
Yeah, or himself. So something else earlier that I thought was interesting. Another argument for potentially honor, potentially pride. When Love and Alejandro come face to face for the millionth time, I guess, in this movie, but for the second time as Zorro.
For the last time.
So, when he... you missed the opportunity. What was I saying? Oh, yeah. So when they come face to face, Love pulls out his gun and throws it to the side, and they proceed with the sword fight. And which is essentially saying, I want to prove to you that I can best you with your own weapon.
Yes.
Or it's saying, I'm not going to... I'm not going to...
I mean, he's saying you're a worthy adversary, so I'm not going to beat you in the easiest way possible, because...
Right. But then again, I feel like if you pointed a gun at Zorro, you're not going to hit him.
Yeah, but very few people try except for the henchmen.
That's a good point.
But, like, I don't know how much thought, and I mean, this is a thoughtful movie, but I don't know how much thought was actually put into that, and how much of it is just, and I don't even mean the rules of society when I say rules now, but I just mean the rules of this kind of movie. It's a sword fighting movie, so we have sword fights. Like how, like how much of it can we, like, I don't want to read too far into it. Like, it's interesting to speculate, but how much of it really is just chalked up to, it's a sword fighting movie, so sword fights.
Such a great death scene, like.
Yeah, it's really good. And that guy is just like a pompous jerk face, and like, you know, there's not a lot to him, and
yeah,
a really well acted role.
Yeah,
but I think he like sorry, good.
No. Do your thing, man.
But I think he's like the like major representation in this movie of like the establishment, even more than Raphael is, where he's made by these people, and like he doesn't really have his own worldview and thoughts. Or I think he's supposed to be two-dimensional.
Yeah, I mean, oh yeah, definitely supposed to be two-dimensional. You could even argue that it's almost like brainwashing, because he is obviously a member of the military. He is not, or he's a member of the state's police force, whichever it is. However you want to call it. At some point, these are kind of the same thing. And he is the fist of the state, you know? He is a tool of the state.
See, I'm glad I didn't write this movie, because I would have put lines where we didn't need lines. Because, like, after she says, Alejandro, my line would have been, hi there! And I don't think that would have played as well.
Hola, señorita.
No, it would have been hi there.
Mine would have been, howdy! And then we could have talked about whether or not this was a Western.
Why is Alejandro in every other scene The Tick? Like, why is that? Hi there! I don't know if the wood splinters need to be moving in slow motion, but...
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's kind of fun.
I guess this answers how much wood could be chuck.
In case you didn't know, it was made entirely of wood. Now
wood
you
and
know.
gunpowder, look at that.
I just thought I would mention slow motion because Vince always likes to complain about slow motion, and
which
that I think is the only
bugs me. He didn't put his mask back on, but this is very
That's
much
a
so.
Good point.
Pardon me. So this is very much so like the Mark of Zorro, where his identity no longer matters to hide it once he has defeated the big bad in the Mark of Zorro. Because he was, he was essentially just hiding it until he achieved his goal. Now that he's achieved his goal, he can be a leader within the town as Diego de la Vega.
And so it's fine if they all know. Although the problem with that is if some other like horrifying dictator-like character comes in,
right? Who's the guy in the mask?
Yeah, then you have like loads of townspeople to torture for information.
Right. I mean, that's the idea. Is you essentially protect the townspeople from themselves. You protect. Yourself and your family. I mean, everybody talks about everybody. Every superhero thing that I've seen essentially says that I want to protect my family, so I protect my identity. But you could also protect the people that you're protecting. Like,
well, yeah, I mean, you could basically just be like a leader and you know, ride into a blaze of glory as like the general if you have to go to war or something and be on the front line, and then you can do that fun thing where like the mask isn't to protect your identity, but it's a symbol now. So like whenever you ride into battle, you wear the mask. Everybody knows who you are, but like it means something.
Right.
You do that,
which is it essentially. Yeah, that's what they're doing with the American mythology comics right now.
Oh, cool! I've not looked at them.
They're interesting. I've been enjoying them. David Avallone did the first few.
Who publishes that? I don't know anything about that.
American Mythology.
Oh.
I don't know if it's
I'm sorry,
a new
I didn't
publisher.
know what we were talking about. I thought that was a title. That's a publisher?
Yeah, it's a publisher.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are they making?
A bunch of like licensed stuff. They got Edgar Rice Burroughs stuff. Wait, yeah, but not Tarzan.
Interesting.
They got like they have Zorro.
Also, the kinds of stuff where you have to put Burroughs' name above it so everybody knows it's Burroughs, sort of like Gene Roddenberry's, you know, Andromeda.
For example, Pellucidar. So that's one of the things they do.
I'm sorry, what? I've never heard of that.
So I'm enjoying.
Oh no, he's gonna grow up to be Joker. His name's Joaquin.
That's hilarious.
I didn't remember that. Okay, this is gonna be the scene where he says, "A lot of men have been Zorro." Hopefully, we didn't talk over it, or we won't be able to come down on this at all.
I love the idea.
I don't think at any point he used flowers, but he should have done that. That would have been funny.
I like the idea that you could potentially just tear the crap out of a bouquet of flowers, or just swinging it around like a sword. I don't know.
See, I also would have ruined the scene if I was writing it by having the next line be, "These are for you."
That's cute. You know, I don't have like any just sweet moments with my daughter because my nickname for her is literally Chunky, Chunkster, and Chunky Butt.
Give her a different nickname, Vince, that you can use in moments like that.
She's gonna hate that when she's 16.
Anything.
Oh boy. Now we have recorded evidence on the internet. Poor kid.
I'm gonna hold that over you, son. Oh man, did we talk over it?
I think we might.
He says it somewhere. Gosh darn it. Is this where he says it?
California.
Oh no, it's not. He could be anywhere. And like, this movie earns this scene, right?
Yeah.
Like, this moment feels like a real kind of standard, obvious Hollywood moment, but not in this movie.
Yeah, I agree.
And like, it's got the kind of, I mean, it's lovely, but it's got the kind of sappy score behind it. Whatever, it works. Like, they earned it.
It's a great payoff. Like, this movie...
There are moments where in the face he looks like Brendan Fraser. It's like 2 or 3 moments in this movie where he gives a smile where I'm like, he's Brendan Fraser.
Well, what we consider to be attractive over the years does, as a culture...
And see, now it's Batman Forever again.
There is... Or James Bond.
No, but specifically with that light the way it is, it's Batman Forever. Like...
I love the sound effects as he hits, so it's not just... But the actual blaze and stuff, it's great.
So this movie is, like 2 hours and 10 minutes long, 2:15. It doesn't feel it at all, yeah.
It moves at a breakneck pace, and it doesn't feel rushed. I don't feel like it should be any longer than it is.
Yeah, no, it just works. I didn't know Spielberg was a producer on this movie.
Sometimes I'm one of those guys that actually thinks that the perfect runtime for a movie is 90 minutes. So, now, granted...
It just depends on what it is, right?
I also really like Dances with Wolves, so, like...
I think, because a lot of people like that, where, like, anything more than 90 minutes, anything more than 120 minutes, I'm done. Like I just want to check out. But I would, and I forgot, Horner did the score. I would offer up this suggestion. It doesn't matter if you're not looking at your watch, because movies are like dreams. You cannot tell how long they are unless you've seen enough movies and they're really formulaic where you can like kind of plot the beat to beat and be like, okay, we must be about half an hour in because this is when this scene happens, right? Like
10 minutes, inciting
it's not
incident.
about how
30 minutes, plot point.
It's not about It's not about how long the movie is. It's about how long the movie feels.
Right.
That's way more important. So this movie feels like about an hour and 45. So it's fine that it's 220 because it doesn't feel like it's 220. Folks that complained after Dark Knight that Dark Knight was too long, like, that's somewhat understandable because they're used to a 3-act formula, and that movie has like 5 acts, and it has like a double beat ending, and I think it works just fine for that movie. But I also get why it felt long to people. So then we can have a discussion and an argument about whether or not that's a problem. But like, I think how long a movie feels is a lot more important than how long it actually is. Because you're not looking at a clock the whole time. How would you know? And if it's doing its job, you'd never notice.
You know, sometimes we use the word formula.
Or you might go, God, this is a really long movie, but I don't want to leave. I'm so glad it's this long. That's another thing that can happen, where it's like, I can tell that I've been sitting here for 3 hours, but I don't want to leave this world. I'm so glad it's this long.
It sometimes... It also kind of depends on in which format you're watching, because if I'm sitting in a movie theater and it's a 3.5 hour movie, I'm sorry, I gotta pee. Like, this needs an intermission.
A lot of variables.
And if
in
it
different places
ever,
where you are, it's going to matter who's around you. It's going to matter what the temperature is. Right.
If it ever drags, like if there's ever a moment where King Kong is like looking one direction, looking another direction, we cut to see what he looked at, and then he looks back and he's doing the same thing for 5 minutes. Then you start looking at your watch, going, "Come on, man! Like, is this essential?" But then you also,
unless you're sucked in,
right? Which.
Because there's all those scenes in Breaking Bad that out of context you'd be like, why is this 10 minutes long?
Right.
And then in context, when you're like really interested in these characters, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, no, we need to be sitting here this long.
Which would be the format, or depending on how you look at it, the formula. So when we say formulaic, I don't know why I want to make this point, but when we say formulaic,
time we're just looking at
we often say things
really
like
sappy song that's not great and isn't good enough for this movie. But anyway,
I don't know why I still kind of like it. I'll be honest with you. Yes, it is super sappy. Still kind of like it. So
that's fine. I just want to go ba da 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 da.
Where's Seal? I mean, no, seriously, what's he doing?
Where is Seal?
He
put out a record a couple of years ago that was pretty good.
Oh, that's fair. That's really the only Seal song I ever listened to is that one.
Oh, I'm actually kind of a Seal fan, yeah. He finally put out some original music again. He'd been doing a lot of soul covers for a long time. And then he did an album of big band jazz standards, and it didn't work with his voice, I didn't think. He went back and did like a bunch of Sinatra and stuff, and I was like, it's not working for you, man. Like, he did the best he could. It's not... It doesn't work with his style.
To me, he's a lot like Conway Twitty. His voice sounds forced, and which isn't a problem.
I don't have that. I think it just depends on. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah,
it's not unpleasant, but it sounds like
doesn't work with everything.
It's coming across a little harsh, so it's not melodic and smooth and pretty.
It doesn't sound natural, certainly.
Yeah.
There's a lot of raspiness.
Exactly, and that's why it sounds forced. It's almost like if that man gave a 2-hour speech, he's not probably going to be able to talk at the end of the day. That's how it sounds like to me.
Yeah, it doesn't sound good on your voice. Well, Johnny Cash had that. Like he was taking voice lessons, and his voice teacher told him to not come back because he had such an original style of singing that she was like, you're going to be able to use that, and it's going to make you famous, and you shouldn't take voice lessons. But it ruined his voice because he was doing it wrong, and it was too harsh, and it was too guttural, and it was messing up his throat. And so if he had taken voice lessons and learned how to sing properly, he wouldn't have had such a messed up, raspy voice at the end of his career. You also wouldn't have gotten hurt.
So what you're saying
there's a trade-off to everything.
So he comes to the microphone, and he's literally telling us that he hurt himself today.
It's exactly what he's saying. Yeah.
So,
decades before that song was written.
That's right.
These are long credits for mid-90s. They're also just scrolling really slow. Like, I don't know that there's actually more credits than normal for a movie like this at this period, or if they're just
we're coming up on that.
Really slow. It was 98. Okay.
So, I guess the point that I was going to make.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. We got sidetracked. What was I going to say?
Where else were we going to talk about Seal that long? So, Batman Forever commentary that we made already? Yeah.
That's hilarious. So the idea of a formula or something being formulaic.
Chief of Staff to the President of Mexico.
When we say something is formulaic, and technically that word is correct.
Yeah.
What we're really criticizing it for being is old hat, easy, like something that you've seen a million times before. But when we're talking about a formula, sticking to a formula working for a medium.
Yes.
What we're essentially talking about is timing. So if you have a 5 or a 6 act show, then what you're talking about is something that's probably better served in a miniseries.
It's a big risk at the very least, yeah.
If you're talking about something that can be told in 3 acts, even if those acts are longer or shorter than they ought to be, if you can convincingly tell your story within those 3 acts, you have told your story as a way that will be satisfying to your audience.
Because you don't want to just plug in for a formula in that, like, you're not actually telling a character-driven story. You're just, making a movie the way you would do a math problem, but at the same time, if you get too far away from audiences' expectations, then you're risking they're not going to stay with you and they're not going to understand why you're going against what they're used to. So, I mean, it's, you have to take everything on a case-by-case basis, like I always say, in deciding when to do that and when not to. But
darn tootin' and precisely.
Dark Knight would have been better served as two movies if it had worked out that way. But there was also a lot of circumstantial stuff that made it work out the way it did. But anyway, enough
That's
about
the end of
that.
the movie.
Yeah, thanks a lot for listening, you guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Vince, thanks for coming in with me, because this wouldn't have been anything like as good of a commentary without you and without some Zorro knowledge. And I think we did a pretty good job sinking our teeth into the ideas and story of this movie.
Thank you. Like, aren't you supposed to say, like, happy to be here? No, thank you.
Vince, I hope you come back again soon. I miss having you. I miss doing stuff like this with you.
Yeah, it's fun.
Maybe at some point the Mask, because I don't know why I've never done it. I don't think I've done a commentary. I'm going to look, because it's possible I did and I don't remember it.
I feel like I could contribute to a Mask commentary, not necessarily because I know anything about the Mask, but more so that I'm just full of crap. So here we go.
No, it helps. Yeah, me too. But you put two of those people in a room. And
what you have is an emoji movie.
But yeah,
it's crap. Anyway,
yeah, this is wonderful, and we're looking at the at the menu right now, and it, of course, like a lot of movies, like shows all the important scenes, so you feel like you saw the movie already before you watch the movie. But like, I had to get up for a minute, and I missed the part where she gets the dress ripped off, and now I've seen it again. So
if you see the Blu-ray to Barton Fink, or not Blu-ray, if you see the DVD to Barton Fink, they literally show the climax of the movie.
No way.
Not a joke. They show.
That's the movie with the fire at the end, right?
Well, there's several movies with fire in the end, but
I
yes.
mean, that's what we're talking about, right? Yeah. So Eric made me watch that movie for a made me watch video we made a couple years. We were doing a series called He Made Me Watch a couple years ago. We haven't been making that as much lately, and he had me watch that movie, and then we shot a video for it, and the file got corrupted or lost or something, and we never posted it. So like, I have actually seen that movie, but that's the one he made me watch that we never actually had a video about.
I liked it a lot.
It's excellent.
I thought that movie was terrific.
It's fast. I need to watch it again. But yeah, I was trying to make sure that was the movie we were talking. But that is the movie. Yeah.
There's all kinds of interesting points about this guy who essentially believes that he's more important to writing in general than he is.
Yes.
And the end of the day, things spiral out of control, and they show the exact moment that things go south. And it's not even like it's just playing behind the credits. Or not credits. It's not like it's just playing behind the menu. You have to watch about a minute and a half or 2 minutes worth of the climax before you get to the menu.
This is, by the way,
audio and all.
I know you guys aren't seeing this right now. This is way too long to go after a commentary, but this is true. The most overproduced menu I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Or one of them. When you move your cursor around, it makes a thwip noise. And it's really produced. And a lot of movies don't even bother. Anything Warner Brothers puts out anymore, they don't even have interactive menus. They just don't even care.
That's fair. It's all just this big blue screen that you have to go click.
Oh, it's bad. Like, some of those menus look like they were made on Windows DVD Maker.
Yeah.
And I'm not even exaggerating. That's what they look like. It might have been the program they used.
I'm not necessarily corroborating about, you said Warner Brothers, right?
Warner Brothers, yeah.
But
especially their superhero stuff.
I have seen several DVDs that, especially for things that didn't necessarily get a significant audience, where they just... there's no graphic in the background. I'm like, just put a graphic on.
Yeah, but like they'll have a graphic, but then if it's a TV show... where you have to pick your episode, there's nothing behind that part, and it'll have like generic bullet points where it's just like an arrow or something. It's like really bad.
I'm not sure which screen I'm in, but I hope I'm on episode 5.
Yeah, it's bad. Anyway, thanks again for listening, guys. We'll see you again in the not too distant future with lots more videos here on Geekvolution, and hopefully I'll have Vince back again not too long from now. I'm Captain Logan.
Justice for all. I am Vince.
Thanks for being here, Vince. Bye, everybody.